screen, you'll be able to switch from active speaker view to grid view, which I highly recommend you do for the optimal viewing experience. We'll have multiple speakers on the virtual stage at once, so grid view is the best experience there. Similarly, there's a Chrome and Firefox extension that you can download. You can watch directly in your browser, but if you download the extension, it makes it, again, a more seamless user experience for you in the audience. If you look towards the bottom of your screen, there's a 3-dot icon. If you click on that, it says more options. There's a couple things you could do there. One is to open the Q&A widget. So highly recommend you do that. We do allocate time at the tail end of all of our fireside chats for audience questions. So please don't be shy. Send us your questions, send the speakers your questions. We'll make sure they'll get them, and we make sure to get to as many of those as we can. If you're going to be posting along on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc., we use the hashtag BILivecast. So you can certainly join the social conversation concurrent to today's event. And of course, we highly recommend you do that and encourage all the social discussions. It's not too late to invite a friend, so certainly welcome. You can share the URL that you use to log in with anybody. They can register still and access today's content, or if they cannot attend today, everything will be available on demand. You can check out the Brand Innovators site. All of our fantastic virtual programming is available in our on-demand tab. A big thank you to Cisco WebEx, our partner for today, technology platform here powering all of our virtual programming. So big thank you to them. And with that, I think we're going to get started in just a second. I don't know how many of you, I guess if you're here today, the world of real estate is important to you. As somebody who just refinanced their mortgage and went through all of those hoops, it's a fascinating world. Mortgage rates are dropping. The housing market is as high and crazy as ever, with lots of demand and very little inventory. So we're here today to talk to both executives in the commercial and residential real estate business, to talk about their business and how it's evolving amidst the pandemic and what they're doing on the marketing front. So we've got a fantastic group to kick off with. Benji Baer, the Global Chief Marketing Officer at CBRE, and Brian Martin, the SVP of Marketing and Communications from Project Worldwide. So Benji, welcome. Always great to have you here with us today. Always, and today especially. And Brian, I see you've joined as well, coming in. How you guys doing?
We're great. How are you, Mr. Energy David? My.
Oh, it's just a lot of coffee. That's all it is. There's no secrets. I just, I load the caffeine and then I coast the rest of the day until it all works. But if you're not excited and enthusiastic about your own events, like who else is going to be, right? You've got to get everyone into it. So we are thrilled to have you here, Benji. As always, like I said, Brian, I will turn the virtual stage over to you to kick off and lead the discussion, and then I'll be back when you guys are done.
Great, thank you, David. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Martin, and I'm the SVP of Marketing and Communications at Project Worldwide. Project is an independent holding company of ad agencies. We have a network of about a dozen agencies that were built for modern day marketers. And today we're talking with a modern day marketer. Benji Baer is the Chief Marketing Officer of CBRE, the largest commercial real estate company in the world. Welcome, Benji.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for including me, inviting me. I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you and dialogue.
Well, so am I. So Benji, you were at some great companies earlier in your career. You were at AllianceBernstein, Citibank, Legg Mason. More recently, you were at JP Morgan Chase, where you worked in a number of key positions on the investment management and wealth management side of the business. You made the move to CBRE in July of last year, 6 months before the COVID pandemic hit. Did you have a premonition there would be a global pandemic, and therefore you were looking to have a key role in an industry that would be seriously affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, no, not so much. Obviously, none of. If only, I would have hopefully done some great things for the world had I had that. But of course, I didn't. But I was very intrigued by the opportunity in the commercial real estate space. For two reasons. One, I saw an industry sort of working through a similar transformation that I had gone through in financial services probably a decade before. So really could see where they were going and thought I could add value to help accelerate some of those changes. And secondarily, I found real estate, a growing, thriving and fascinating industry that was somewhat adjacent to what I'd been doing, but yet unlocked a bit from a lot of the compliance and regulation that you see in financial services. So I went for a little bit of, I think, liberation at the same time.
And so that was a big move for you. I'm sure your team at JP Morgan Chase was a much bigger team than what you're dealing with now. I imagine you've got like 500 people on your marketing team.
Yeah.
How did you go through the process of figuring out how you'd want to structure that team in your new role as you're facing a future of what you're up against in the real estate business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it took obviously quite a bit of learning, because some of the elements of marketing that the firm had made an investment in were wholly different, I would say, from what I was used to. So the two biggest areas were really around what I would call conversion marketing, almost that sales enablement piece, which was really built out and bespoke and custom proposals and operations, was new for me and somewhat unique in terms of the depth, as well as property marketing. But how did I approach it is I really did basically a world tour. The firm has 500 plus offices around the globe. And I spent a lot of my July and August and September visiting as many offices as I could, getting to know the people, getting to know the business first and foremost, because there was a different vernacular and it was a different dynamic. And then getting to know the talent and understanding where there were gaps and where there were opportunities. And I would say within 60 days, I had outlined what that new program was going to look like and what that new model was going to look like. And we've been delivering against it ever since then.
Did you have any surprises in those early days, things you didn't expect to be happening or doing?
Yeah. Look, I had done, I think both myself and CBRE had done very sufficient due diligence on each other before we joined. And that was both, knowing what I was about, knowing what they were about, but understanding the platform and the people. So there wasn't anything that totally struck me out of left field. I think, one of the shifts and one of the things that's taking up much more of my time and my brain than I had anticipated, that many of you on the call probably maybe already recognize, is the importance of employer marketing and the importance of the employees as well as the talent as actually, first or second in priority for a business marketer. And I think that struck me, how that was happening. It wasn't happening in a formalized, institutionalized way across the firm, but that being such a big need. In fact, I had a call with our head of North Asia marketing this morning, and I said to him, tell me what percentage of your time is actually spent on these sort of activities? And he's like 30 to 40%. I was blown away. And trust me, my CEO doesn't realize that. And so there's a big message in that we're trying to solve for. It's terribly important, but you need to plan for it. Otherwise, the client facing, the actual revenue driving marketing isn't going to happen. So I would say that was a big sort of, you can call it a surprise, that came upon me as I walked into that full on CMO role. Obviously, I was not the CMO at JP Morgan. I ran a big part of the marketing, but not all of it. So this is something that I think people sitting in the C-suite or in that CMO role are encountering right now. And it's an important trend to take quite seriously.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because your people are expressing the brand in all their one-on-one conversations, and that's a really important point of contact for you. Very smart to activate that. What were your successes? Like before the pandemic kicked in, did you feel like you'd had a number of successes already?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always hard, right? You want to have an early impact. But I would tell you, I have a 3-year plan that I mapped out around, evolving the brand and really strengthening the marketing platform. I was fortunate, as I said, I quickly put a plan in place, and I made a couple of key strategic hires early on. And thank God I did that, because when the pandemic hit, we were in a much better place. I was halfway through the transformation, but we were able to quickly pivot to a digital first approach to content activation and content engagement with our clients. So we had a new leader of events who now became the leader of virtual events. We had a leader of content that hadn't existed before, and that woman took lead, and we stood up our first ever podcast series, which I'm very proud of, was just ranked in the Forbes top 15 must listen industry resources across all
That's
industries.
great.
So it's called the Weekly Take. And I will tell you, even if you're not in real estate, there's some fascinating topics that we're covering, like what's the impact of COVID on the entertainment industry? And so what does that mean for real estate in Southern California and LA? Great sort of, human interest kind of topics as well. So in terms of early wins, that was a big one. And then what we saw, I like to say when the world went dark, CBRE went bright. We went on all cylinders around digital engagement, thought leadership. We really convened a very tight SWAT team in the organization focused on providing guidance and advice and our best thinking through this obviously very fluid and still changing situation. But it also broke down silos. So, the silver lining in this, I suppose, is that while there was that tremendous adversity, people around the world from the firm really, I think, came together quite quickly. And that sort of connective tissue I see, portending very well for us in the future.
Interesting. So you're in the real estate business, commercial real estate business, which has been very hard hit. Do you see that? Are you looking at that as a long-lasting impact on your business, or are you starting to see changes and people coming back in any way? And are you starting to see hope for where your business is going at this point?
Yeah. So, as an industry, that's a great question. And people, obviously, when they think of us, they think of office space, but our portfolio, leasing office space, is actually a very important part of our business, but it's not the only part of our business. So first of all, I would say the portfolio extends to, people never think about these, because I certainly hadn't. We're involved in space for data centers. We're working with the largest life sciences companies. We're working with hospitals. So while certainly the office sector was hard hit in the very beginning significantly, there are other sectors, particularly industrial and logistics being another, as we support Amazon and other large, e-commerce and omni-channel offerings. You saw an increase, and you saw actually increased demand. As it relates to returning to the office, we've done a number of in-depth studies with both our clients, so the largest Fortune 100 companies around the world, as well as employees, and asking them just those questions. What is your opinion? Do you want to come back to work? Assuming COVID, everything is safe and healthy to return. And then we've asked our, leaders, or the CEOs or the heads of real estate of the largest companies, and it's been a very active dialogue trying to understand where this is landing. And this is evolving, but I think where we're netting out is office is certainly not dead. The importance of being face-to-face with your colleagues, creating culture, enabling collaboration, and being part of something greater than, while it's lovely to talk to you on the screen, it is not the same as sitting around a table, working on a smart board or whatever together. And we see shifts, we see hybrid models coming to the fore, and we're working very closely with some of the largest companies across 4 dimensions as they think about their space. Labor opportunity, location opportunity, occupancy, and ultimately, what is that design and experience? So, I would say the demand for our services in some respects is greater than ever. It's just the complexion of them is shifting a bit.
It's interesting because as I think about commercial real estate, I think more transactional, like we need a space, let's fill it up, and you'll facilitate that.
Yeah.
But the service side of your business seems to be taking on an increasing element, especially during the pandemic, as people begin to rethink the offices. How much of what you're doing is to play up that service side of your business?
Yeah. So I would say even prior to the pandemic, this idea of advisory and even wrapped in the transaction, and I work very closely, there's a very famous, one of the first women who really dominated the space, Marianne Tai, and she dominates New York real estate. Some of you may have heard of her. And I've watched her in action, and she, of course, executes on the transaction and some of the largest transactions, Hudson Yard, World Financial Center, World Trade Center. But part of that interaction and that engagement is consultative. It's trying to understand what the client is seeking, right? And there's a lot of complexity. This isn't a one and done. There's a lot of ability to customize solutions and bring a lot of creativity to the table. And then creating that solution on the back end. And some of that may be fit outs, it might be renovations, et cetera, et cetera. So it's always been in our DNA. I would say, Brian, what we're doing more, though, as you said, is we're leaning more into this idea of really being a solutions provider and being a partner with our clients and bringing, as you said in the opening, we are the largest real estate solutions provider in the world. We have so many capabilities. I think one of the things that stands in our way sometimes is even having our client-facing professionals understand the breadth and depth. So one of my roles and one of my key mandates is to help simplify the offering and create it in a way that's much more accessible and understandable to our clients and to our own sales and sales professionals, so they can really deliver the firm to those clients. So in answer to your question, it's a huge part of our mindset, and we're building out, the right people to be able to deliver a much more solutions-oriented and needs-based approach. And again, going back to the earlier comment, is why I joined, is because I saw that whole evolution and transformation happening on the financial services side a decade ago, right? None of us go and talk to our broker or financial advisor and say, I want a stock, I want a bond, or I want a mutual fund. You say, I'm trying to save for my retirement. Right. I'm trying to save money for my child's education. So most of our clients have a problem they're seeking to solve. And I will tell you, we can solve all of them, but it's shifting that dialogue that is actually core to how we're thinking about going to market as we move forward.
There's the effect of the pandemic on your business, but then there's a longer arching trend of co-working spaces. I know the emergence of WeWork many years ago, and we're just seeing a high number of companies setting up in New York and in other markets to handle spaces like that for entrepreneurs or tend to be smaller companies. Has that had an impact on your business? Is that the business you're in, and is that affecting the way you go to market in any way?
Yeah, no, it's another great topic. So we saw that emerging trend, that desire for agility and flexibility, either by smaller size businesses or entrepreneurs. But we also saw it as an interesting complement to some of the largest companies as companies try and think about their long-term commitment to space and trying to anticipate employment needs and labor needs going forward. And so we made a commitment and a pretty significant investment about 3-4 years ago in an offering called Hana. And it's our co-working offering that is like a WeWork, although it's much more premium in nature. And we are now seeing greater demand for that, but it's actually coming from the largest tenants in the world who, again, are trying to think about their real estate portfolio truly as one thinks about an investment portfolio. How much do I want in long-term bonds and how much do I want in short-term bonds? So that I can have flexibility to go in and out depending on the needs of my business at a certain point in time. Listen, real estate is a long-term commitment, right? If you'd make a decision, JP Morgan's a great example. They just took down 270 Park Avenue. Their global headquarters that I was once in on the 20th floor. That's a 40 plus story building. It's now being rebuilt. It's a 5 to 7 to 8 year commitment. They're now displaced. How many, 20, 30, 40, I should know, 50,000 people across New York and other places. That's a big commitment. So if you're going to do that, how do you monitor and how do you manage the need for office space on the margin? And we think co-working is a great way to do that, or flexible office space. So the demand is coming, and it's probably surprising for people to hear that, but the demand is actually coming from that side of the business even more so.
It's interesting because I've always thought of the real estate business as being less flexible, but it seems like you're being very agile in this new world and responding to people's needs and helping them manage their own way into those needs.
Exactly. And we're even working with landlords and giving them this sort of HANA offering as kind of almost like the hotelification, right? You might hire the Ritz-Carlton if you own a building to run a hotel for you. Well, they might hire CBRE to run their co-working. A portion of their building could be co-working space, either white labeled or under the HANA umbrella. So there are lots of permutations and lots of kind of really interesting innovations taking place as we speak.
And interesting, so we're talking a lot about office space, but in every one of your buildings, I'm sure there's retail space as well. And I'm sure that has been hugely affected by the pandemic. I know that you've been working with the Amazons of the world from a logistics perspective. Are you doing much in the retail spaces to help that business come back in any way?
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough, obviously a challenging one right now. When we talk about retail, we think about bank branches being a huge part of it. Obviously, office, stores that you might go into. So it is an important part of our portfolio, and we're trying to bring that same level of creativity to the table. We actually have a joint venture with a firm called Street Sense. So I'll give a little shout out to them, who are very involved in rethinking retail and restaurants and other type of kind of street level opportunities. So that is definitely part of the offering and the portfolio as we move forward.
So I want to go back a little bit to your team. I know that you said that you've traveled the world meeting all of your people in different markets.
Yep.
Are you in any way a centralized organization, or it seems like you're a very decentralized organization? And what are the challenges that the pandemic has had on managing something like that?
Yeah. So I think you asked me earlier about one of my surprises. So one of the surprises maybe I hadn't fully appreciated when I joined CBRE was the level of kind of decentralization from a marketing standpoint. Central was really small. I showed up in New York and it was kind of me and a couple of people. I'm like, wow, like this is different. This is different. And so I'm working to probably over-index from where the firm is used to in terms of a central or global sort of mindset. And the benefits of that are scale and leverage, which hopefully that feels good to our CEO because that's, would drive cost savings, but it's also a better customer experience. So if we can create a more consistent and elevated CBRE experience by having consistency at a global level, that should be a good thing for everyone, right? At the same time, every market is different and real estate is local in many ways. And it's really important that we have the right connection points and drive greater communication with all of those marketers that are sitting in those probably 500 offices. In this case is excessive. But I would say, we have at least 25, if not more, marketing people or teams in 25 different markets in Europe. In the US, we have at least 12 to 14. Wow. And then in Asia, we are in Vietnam, Dubai. I mean, I'm giving you random, right? India, we probably have 3 or 4 offices. So we're in so many places you can't imagine. So I would say communication is of the utmost importance. And I initiated, and this is, again, isn't rocket science, but I initiated a monthly letter that I send to the team. The kind of feedback I get is off the charts. Thank you for letting us know about this. This is great. They just appreciate being touched and feeling like they're part of something bigger and part of something that's more being led with a central agenda and a view. And so I think that's been obviously very personally satisfying to me to feel like I'm making a difference and being able to connect a lot of people and connect the dots. But I think it also has created a renewed energy across the marketing team.
I know that people can submit questions. I'm not seeing any in the chat box, but if you have questions at home, please go ahead and send it to us in a chat, and I'll be happy to ask Benji your questions. But one of the things I'm curious about, because I know at JP Morgan Chase and some of your other roles, you had an organization that has, at least on the consumer side of the business, they were the management was much more marketing savvy. Like they understand the need to market to consumers. On the B2B side, that's probably not as true in the financial world, but I suspect going into CBRE, you went into an environment where marketing was probably a new skill for their senior management team. Yeah. What did you do about getting them up to speed in terms of appreciating what you're doing and supporting it, which is not always an easy task?
Yeah, I mean, that takes a lot of my brain power and mind share, but I will give the company an awful lot of credit. All the way up to our CEO, who literally I spent, hours with him at times, just sort of explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it. And yeah, no, it's been an education across the board, and it's something I do day in and day out, and trying to empower my senior leaders to do the same, so that we all are really shifting the perception of marketing as a service and kind of reactive capability to one that is hand in glove aligned to our revenue driving efforts and are really seen as a growth driver of the business. So yes, a big part of time, a lot of education. We're still on that journey. You do it piece by piece. And I think, I have a lot of commitment, enthusiasm, and COVID, frankly, another silver lining. I think COVID showed us up quite well and showed the value that marketing could bring when salespeople couldn't be face to face with their clients.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, so we're starting to get some questions in from the audience. Here's one. What are your biggest priorities for 2021 from a marketing standpoint?
So, yep. I mean, I put them across two dimensions. One is to create a real demand engine that's digitally enabled. So we have very, small little, green shoots of that, but really creating a best-in-class platform there is terribly important to us, as well as rethinking our content strategy in a pretty significant way. So in the B2B world, relationships are king, and content is a way to help build those relationships. So we're really laser focused on those two areas explicitly. In terms of our go-to-market, that, as I said earlier, it's a lot about changing the perception in the market of CBRE as a solutions provider, and one that can deliver tremendous value at almost any point in the real estate cycle for both investors, who are a core part of our client base, as well as tenants or occupiers, people that actually use space for a variety of reasons to allow their businesses to thrive. We're thinking through some campaigns for the following year and how to drive greater awareness and really perceptual changes of our offering. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Another question, what do you think the biggest lesson marketers have learned this year? The biggest lessons marketers have learned.
I think the value, hopefully, whether marketers have learned this, but I think business has seen that how critical their marketing partners are, and creating an agile, and I talked about before, agility, communication, and having the right talent on the team to be able to move and pivot really quickly is quite important. So I would put those as kind of my top takeaways for marketers. I don't know. I'm actually, Brian, I wonder, given that you run all of these amazing agencies, how you would how you might answer that question.
Well, it's interesting because one of our biggest agencies in our network is an event marketing agency.
Yeah.
And that business, as you mentioned earlier, kind of changed to virtual like back in March, and we could see that for the whole year. So it has clearly been a year of focusing on digital approaches. And fortunately, we've got a number of agencies that are very strong digitally, general agencies, specialty agencies. And so we've done well as a network, despite the fact that our biggest holding had a significant drop off. So that's really That's good. I'm curious about how you selected your partners, because there's a centralized approach where you may say, like, let's go with a large holding company and then pick the ones that's right in each region, or are you let's find the best of breed, and is that a global best of breed, or are you finding regional markets because you're so diverse?
Yeah, again, early on, that was a key focus for me, was to really suss out best of breed. But before even doing that, you need to really be clear with yourself around what you need and what you're trying to achieve, and then identify the best of breed. And I will tell you, we have four to five key agencies that are supporting us globally in different aspects of our business or our marketing needs. And they've all killed it in a really positive way. I couldn't be happier. And I also always say you're only as good as the people managing the agencies. And so we've really been intentional around bringing them together, making sure we're very thoughtful that there's open communication, and really establishing up front kind of a no bullshit, if I could say that, like open dialogue, and being able to criticize each other and give feedback to each other through the process. Because a lot of the work that each of the agencies are doing, there's a high level of interdependency. So if you don't like the design and it's going to go to the digital agency, like, it's all going to be bad. So like, people really had to work truly as a team, and we created an interagency team under the CBRE banner, but the agencies themselves are all from different organizations for the most part.
Interesting. Had your agencies worked together in prior lives on different brands at all?
Yeah, the media agency and the creative agency had, but other than that, I don't think so. I had worked with one or two of them before, so I had experience, but I would tell you, we did a very detailed due diligence process. No one was hired sight unseen, or just because I had worked with them before. We had very specific proposals, and we had a slate of at least 5 competing agencies for every decision. And look, at the end of the day, some of it's the work, I will give you guys, whoever's, if there are agencies on the call, show you want the business, come prepared, read the brief. I mean, these are basic things, but I will tell you, I was shocked at some of the quote performances that came across. Some were excellent, but some were really not prepared for the pitch. And wow, that's an easy decision to pass on. And then we had others with the decisions were much harder to make, frankly.
I'm curious, kind of in the influence of purpose in brands in today's world. And, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan Chase was a big advocate of purpose, bringing purpose into it. And I know that the world, he's part of an organization that said purpose should be a better part. It shouldn't just be shareholder value anymore. It should be stakeholder value, which includes a lot more purpose-oriented relationships.
Yeah.
How much are you bringing that into your brand building work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's quite core for us. So Bob Selenick, our CEO, is part of the Business Roundtable, as well as Jamie. In fact, I think we're one of the only real estate companies that are part of that. And so Bob is very supportive of that same mindset. And so when we think about our stakeholders, the aperture of who we're targeting or we're talking to or caring about is quite large. And that type of thinking and that approach is very much embedded in our business and in our marketing as we move forward. Absolutely. And so when that purpose statement came out, I think it was, I want to say August of 2019, that was something that was shared throughout the organization and something that we refer back to quite often. And we believe wholeheartedly around.
Yeah, no, I'm an advocate of that as well. And it's good to see companies really embracing that now. Another question from the audience. On the commercial side, what happens if occupancy doesn't return to pre-pandemic levels? Specifically, what do you think happens to that space, and who are you looking at for potential future occupancy or new ways to monetize that space?
Yeah. Listen, I can't give you the exact answer, but the topic of, I'll call it adaptive reuse, is not new to this world, right? We've gone through cycles, nothing quite as dramatic as this, but where certain industries are diminishing and other industries are becoming more important. So the topic of, reusing space and putting it to use in different ways, whether it's mixed use, whether it's senior housing, whether it's, there's so many multifamily, there are many different equations being talked about and being looked at depending on the location in question. But that agility, that creativity, that innovation that I think people don't necessarily understand sits at the underbelly of the commercial real estate business is very alive and thriving, certainly at CBRE, and I'm sure at some of our competing companies.
And how challenging is it building brand when you're dealing with something that's an opaque asset class like real estate? And you probably brought a lot of that learning from your work at JP Morgan Chase, where it was wealth management and a B2B side of that business. How do you deal with that as you figure out the elements of your brand that you want to focus on?
Look, I think everyone on this call, it will nod their head when I say this, but it starts with the customer and what the customer needs and what they value and what's important to them. And so our brand is really built around what they're trying to achieve and how can CBRE meet them in this moment and meet them in the future around that. And our brand, we think will evolve to kind of address that. And so the fact that the fact that data on the asset is not easily accessible, like it might be on a stock exchange, for a stock or a bond. Certainly data is a big part of one of our competitive advantages. And we are starting to share that more broadly and think about interesting ways that it can be used for better decision-making, again, for any of our client types. So we hope that we're going to drive essentially greater transparency in the industry and help people make better decisions to solve whatever their business needs are. And real estate is probably the second largest line item in most companies after their employees and their people. So it is a topic that is sitting very much at the C-suite, and I would say now because of COVID has even been elevated more so. So influencing that audience, thinking about the interdisciplinary way that companies are thinking about space is really important to our brand as well as we think about who we're targeting and the type of themes and topics that we're sharing with them.
Interesting. On a personal level, how has the pandemic affected your family? I know you have 3 daughters. I think they're all of working age, and has it brought you closer together? Have your family been remote?
Yeah. So I guess it depends on the day, Brian. So I have 3 daughters. They're quite remarkable. My greatest achievement, without a doubt. 2 of them are working. My youngest is applying to college, so that's been interesting. And I feel she's obviously a lot of questions in the air. Listen, we're fortunate to live in a beautiful part of northern Westchester, New York, with lots of land and a home that can accommodate them and their friends, if need be, for extended periods of time. And I think, it's been a unique moment, something none of us would have ever anticipated, obviously, but having family around us, barring the health concerns, has been pretty special and magical. So I do feel fortunate. And one of those things that will certainly be a story, over the years, one that many of us will be referring back to in a uniting moment.
Yes, it's been quite a year for everybody.
It's been quite a year. And I know you've made a move as well. I see your beautiful backyard outside of leaving.
I bought this house just before the pandemic, so it was a lucky move, and it was great to hibernate up here while all the craziness was happening in New York. But it's nice to be secluded, but it's also nice to be back in the heart of things. Like, I miss being in an office. We had just moved into 3 floors, brand new office space on March 1st. And so before we even got to really settle in and enjoy it, everybody had to scatter. I'm here today, but I'll be in the office for the rest of the week. I tend to go in because we often have 1 or 2 people coming into the different floors every day, and it's nice for people just to feel like there's somebody there to welcome them. So we're making it work. I think we've realized the value of we can be as productive when we're working remotely, but I think our people just really enjoy being in the same space together more often. So I think we're finding reasons to come together on projects more than we did in the past.
Look, there's a huge social aspect that we don't talk a lot about, and obviously we haven't here, but people build lives and relationships in their offices. Some of my closest friends over the years have been people I've met by working side by side with them and closely with them, and building a career from my computer, from my desk at home, over a long period of time I'm not sure I'd be where I am today if that had been the case. So we are ready to come back to a beautiful office as well when safety allows us to do that in full force.
Yeah, and I think we've done a good job at staying close with our friends through virtual relationships. But I think that seeing everybody on a daily basis, feeling the ebb and flow of people's lives day in, day out, you miss being in an office space for that. So I think what you're doing is really good. We should be getting people back into an office soon. Maybe not 5 days a week, but I think it's good to have people there when you want them now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm not sure how we're doing on time. Do we have any other questions, or have we gone over, or I'm just not sure whether
I think we are just perfectly at time. So this was great. Benji, I love, Brian, that you asked about her family, because I mean, Benji, you wouldn't be here if it weren't for your daughter. So we love that. You're part of the family at this point, right? So fantastic. We love it, and we think of ourselves, we always position ourselves as brand innovators as a community, but maybe we should start calling ourselves a family. I don't know, that's got little mob tones to it, but maybe not. But this is great. Really appreciate it. Again, wonderful discussion. Appreciate you sharing insight with our community and really covering off on your part of the industry. So thank you to Brian. Thank you to Benji. I'll give you the virtual round of applause from the, because you can't hear the audience clapping, but this is great.
But Dave, we got to do a shout out to Izzy Bear. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So again, she's behind the scenes. She's right now making sure everybody looks good, making sure that all the next speakers are prepared. So she's we'll get her on the virtual stage soon enough.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you guys. This was great. And we're going to continue rolling with our show. We have from Melanie Dodge, the Director of Marketing at Better.com. And we have Eli Chapman, the SVP of Marketing and Sales from Celtra, joining us right now. So like I said, we just covered off on the sort of commercial real estate side. Now, we've got Melanie here talking, if you're not familiar with Better.com, they're in the mortgage and lending category. And as I mentioned when I kicked off, I'm in the final stages of a mortgage refinance. I wish we had talked 2 months ago, but that's been a fantastic and volatile area for me to follow personally. It was like going down and going to close on the new rates, and all of a sudden they're still dropping, and it's like, should I wait? Should I hold out? It's like, it feels like you're gambling, and we're not at Vegas, but it very much feels like that kind of world. So it's fun. Welcome, Melanie. Welcome, Eli. I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. Hi, Melanie.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today?
Good. I'm really excited to be here and to hear about that refinance experience. It's funny. This has been a really unique year for everyone in so many ways. And as David was saying, especially in the mortgage space. So I'm excited to chat a little bit about that, about marketing, and get into it.
Yeah, there was, hearing how David was looking and didn't find you. What was missing so Better could have shown up in front of David in his search?
I want to assume maybe he wasn't in one of the few states we're not live in. That's maybe a wrong assumption, but there's a chance of that, of course. But I would love to understand how he kind of found out about his journey. And typically it's word of mouth, or typically it's who you actually used for your first actual loan when you purchased the home. So I'd be curious to hear if he went with that same lender. But that is exactly the kind of nut that we're trying to crack here at Better, how we can get in front of people at the right time.
That's great. All right, so it was nice to see a couple of people in the last call with nice suburban backgrounds. I know you and we've got a little bit different situation. We're both here in Brooklyn at the moment. So just to give people a context where we're calling in from. So I'm Eli Chapman from Seltra. This is Melanie Dodge from Better.com. Melanie, maybe just give people a little bit about your background and what your role is at Better.com.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So calling in from Brooklyn, New York currently. And I'm born and raised in New York, and I went to Georgetown University where I studied finance. And I would say my path is not very traditional in terms of how I've landed in my current role. Started in a sales role, realized that I was not motivated by commission. Shout out to everyone that is. From there, pivoted into a consulting role. And when Eli and I were chatting before this, I think what really motivated me there is that with consulting with your clients, you're really influencing the decisions that they're making. And so it's an audience of sorts that you're messaging to. And so I really enjoyed the communication aspect of it and found myself landing at Better almost 3 years ago. At the time, I wanted to come to an earlier stage company. They had just finished up their Series B fundraising. So they were a lot smaller and in a very different place. And I wanted to come to a company where I could learn a lot about a new industry, and mortgage was very new. And so over the course of my time at Better, I've been in the marketing team, but in a few different roles. So firstly, starting on an acquisition role and growth marketing, really focused on offline and online marketing channels, and we can chat a little bit more through that. And then the role has just really evolved with a fast growing company. That tends to be the case. So started to also oversee our own marketing channels, helped to build out our product marketing function. And so currently that is what I'm helping to run day to day, and then also help to establish our growth squad, which is our cross-functional growth team. So a lot of change, a lot of marketing experience, a broad marketing experience, and really excited to talk a little bit more about that.
That's great. Thanks, Melanie. Yeah, we were thinking in our initial chat, we could use that sort of path that you went on to just to talk about the different chunks of marketing that you're doing within Better, and a little about it, what the teams were like, what collaboration was like, any lessons you've learned. So yeah, maybe we just jump into that and we see where it takes us. So starting with the performance media side, we talked we were talking about maybe David was looking for refinance, maybe he's there aren't the right signals for you to be able to find him, but maybe just tell us a little bit about the performance media function at Better.com and your role when you started out in sort of the team structure.
Yeah, so when I joined the team, there was myself and one other individual really helping to oversee our acquisition spend and strategy. And so this was about early 2018 when I joined, and a lot of what we were spending on was Facebook and Google. So really relying on the ad platforms for their targeting capabilities, for their optimization capabilities, their measurement capabilities. And it was bringing traffic to the website, but it was very expensive. Our CAC was 10x plus what it is today. And so crazy high, crazy expensive. And at the time, our business model was also a bit different. So a lot of things kind of contributed to that. And so when I was brought in, the thought was to just expand and try as many acquisition channels as possible to see kind of what would work. We'll talk about lessons learned. Not the best approach, and we can talk about why. And so we launched podcast advertising, YouTube, direct mail, display advertising, all within the span of a few months. And it was really noisy. We saw an uptick in upper funnel traffic, but we weren't really able to pinpoint what was working and why. Our messaging was all over the place, so we kind of weren't really sure of what creative was actually resonating. It really was just kind of we had a lot of money. We were fortunate for that, and we spent a lot, and we learned what didn't work. And what didn't work is trying a lot of channels with no proper strategy, no informed targeting strategy. And so I learned a lot about the need to have a proper test framework and the need to have a more controlled and conservative approach to new channels. And ultimately kind of going channel by channel is where we've actually come back around to, and understanding for the most part, okay, let's tackle direct mail, for example, these next 3 months. We have our existing media mix already, and let's see if that will start to initiate additional lift. So from that, we started to build out the team. And one thing I didn't mention is a core part of our business is our affiliate marketing channels. And so we've been really lucky to be able to rely on and grow through those. So an example of one of those channels in our current state is NerdWallet. They have really good brand recognition. They have a really strong organic game. They rank very heavily for a lot of search terms. And so when users initiate their home search or their refinance search, they tend to go to a channel like NerdWallet. They trust them, and that's where we appear. So we've really cracked the nut there in terms of meeting the highest intent borrowers where they are and ensuring that we've really put together a really comprehensive strategy. And so where we're at today when it comes to performance marketing is continuing to optimize that affiliate marketing channel, but starting to look past that and figure out, okay, where do we move next? Where do we spend next? And how do we do it in a way that will show positive ROI? And how can we take the lessons that we've learned from 2018? So a little bit of kind of experience there. Would love to go a little bit deeper in some areas if you'd like.
Yeah, on the affiliate one, it's interesting. How do you, so are you creating assets that live in their owned channels essentially for the affiliates?
It's funny. So what we're marketing our interest rate. So that is the asset in a sense. So it's really like an Expedia for lenders where you put in a little bit of information about what you're looking for, your loan scenario, and then it outputs all these different rates and all these different lenders. So you really have your rate and your logo. And because our awareness is actually quite low, it's our rate that's doing the marketing. It's a really unique, advertisement of sorts in a sense, because it's all about your pricing strategy at that point. Is your pricing going to be high enough to appear at number one, but also not too good that you're losing money? And so that's the whole strategy there. There are some other ways that we're advertising there, more so through some native ads within their websites, but exactly, we're advertising our interest rate and some text ads through their own channels.
That's interesting. So it really does. So brand advertising is an area that could really help performance side for you in those affiliate channels, for instance.
Exactly, because we are ensuring that we are priced number one in most instances, or where it makes sense, because that really is the way to win. Because without that recognition, we have to be. We've seen through surveying and data that consumers will only go with us if we save them X amount more versus a lender that they know and trust. So to your point, that's where that layer of brand awareness would really help and have us still price well, because at our core as a brand, we really want to price as low as we can. We're really consumer first in that sense, but also we're trying to make money. We are a for-profit company. So that's where that dynamic comes into play.
That's excellent. So talk a little bit about, so you're coming in, you're in this role, and you do this sort of the everything in the kitchen sink kind of approach, learn that doesn't work and there's a better way. Are you doing it all in-house? Are you using agencies for anything? And just talk about, the levers that you had to try in that first swing at things.
Yeah, so initially we mostly relied on in-house resourcing when I mentioned that kind of array of channels that we launched with. And so that meant that we had the actual marketing strategists or channel owners who were experts in each channel, putting together the strategy, i.e. who we are targeting, what is the messaging or creative going to say. And then we partnered with our internal creative studio to actually create those assets. And then for the most part, depending on the buy we were doing, so within Facebook or Google, we ourselves were actually in the platform setting up the ads, or we would work with some small vendors for podcast advertising buying, doing direct buys actually on NPR, for example. So it was a mix in a sense of working mostly relying on internal, only relying on external for the buy if we wanted to do a direct targeted buy.
That's great. And so what was the collaboration like between your sort of channel experts and the creative team and yourself in coming up with, what message you're going to really put in front of which consumer and which channel?
Yeah, I think we've come really far in terms of that level of collaboration. So looking back to 2018, it really wasn't the proper setup, I would say. I think that's another lesson learned. So back then, the way it really worked is it was very siloed, and we actually really treated our creative studio like an internal agency, which I wouldn't advise, because ultimately, the more that they are integrated and seen as partners, the more value you actually can get out of your creative partners, because they really understand the goal of the campaign, the audience, the learnings you have from previous campaigns, et cetera. So in the past, we would really work on an end-to-end brief and submit that without really a conversation. And it was again, very much you would email your agency the brief, they'd come back, present stuff, it wasn't really there, you had a lot of back and forth happening. So I think what's better to dwell on is in our current state, what we really do is actually bring them in the room at the point of identifying the problem we're trying to solve, which is how we like to look at things, or the goal of the campaign. And what I really am adamant about is because we've been doing this for 3 to 4 years now in terms of paid marketing, all the learnings we have, I think, are so critical to our success. And so the more that we are reminded of what we've learned and or just retain that, the better. And so having our creative partners in the room for those conversations has been really powerful. And it also allows for really transparent and an ease of feedback, because ultimately there's always some feedback on creative. It's a bit subjective at times, as we all know. And so the more that we can point to data, the better. That's always my primary kind of intuition. But then second to that, the more transparent we can be, the more open we can be. If we don't really agree with what's been delivered, the better. And so we've started to build a relationship there in that sense.
That's great. That's a great learning. The in other brand innovators events like this, I was speaking with, for example, Scott Donington from Hulu, who leads the creative team there, and he said he never uses the term agency. He hates it. Partnership is key for exactly the reasons. It creates this silo, creates this wall. That's really interesting that you saw that as well. I think we'll come back to. I want to talk a little bit more about the new forms of collaboration that are effective. I think that's one of the, especially with the remote first era. It's important to all of us. But I'd like to first kind of we talked a little bit about performance. Maybe we can now just talk a little bit about the owned channels. So moving to owned, just tell us a little bit about what the owned channels role entailed. What the major differences were, I think, between the two for you in sort of getting acclimated. And just tell us a little bit about that side of things.
Yeah, so with our own channels, the core channels I've really focused on were our email marketing as a channel and our content and SEO strategy, and really building that out as a channel. And so the major difference, which as I think I don't think it's a perfect example, but a lot of the time with your own channels, you're really complementing and coupling up with the product experience. Not to say that your paid and performance marketing shouldn't be. Ultimately, we've talked about this a bit too yesterday. You really want to make sure that what you're advertising on your paid channel is then also the experience that they're getting, but it is a little bit disconnected in some sense. Whereas with own marketing channels, you don't want to email someone that their interest rate is low and then they go into the product and it's actually high. A very simple example, but just to kind of give it a more tangible example of that. And so we have to make sure that we're collaborating not only with our creative partners and our data partners, but our product partners and our sales partners, because that's where that trifecta really forms across marketing, sales, and product. Because at the end of the day, the consumer doesn't know. I mean, we as marketers probably know the difference between a marketing and sales email, but most consumers don't realize it's just one brand communicating to them. And so that was the biggest learning curve for me, is that marketing couldn't really work in a silo in a sense. Not that we ever did that, but you really had to make sure that you were thinking more consumer first, customer experience first in the strategies that you're producing. And so what I started with, where I really focused efforts initially, was our email marketing team. And knowing that if as a consumer you've given us your email, there's some signal of intent there. And so really building out how we can nurture, build trust, and also offer promotions and discounts to really help with conversion ultimately and drive revenue or funds of mortgages. And so I think the biggest lesson there is when I took it over, it was me, and then I built out this whole team, and we were obsessed with testing everything, which was amazing. Setting up a proper test framework, I would highly recommend. It's really important to do holdout testing to actually understand, is this email adding value or is it just more noise in the experience? But there is definitely a wall you hit with testing fatigue. You can only test subject lines so many times. You can only test the fourth email in a series so many times. And so understanding the trade-offs between incremental improvements to performance and testing and making sure you are testing, and taking a step back and understanding, okay, in order to actually have some impact here, we probably need to now take a step back and think about segmentation. We've done what we can in our current state with subject line testing, with image testing, et cetera. But in order to actually see this move the needle, we need to start a new, more strategic approach. So I think that's where the team is at today, really leveraging all the data we collect, the behavior of the user to inform our email marketing. I would say we built up a great machine to do that now. And so that's been the biggest takeaway for me. And then on the content and SEO side, start investing in SEO as early as possible. It's a difficult one. And I feel like anyone on this call might be shaking their head as Eli is, especially to convince executives who aren't as familiar with SEO or with the power of it. You don't see the impact on day one or day two or day 30, 60 most likely. It is really an investment over time. And we actually really started investing only last year this time. And we're starting to see now the impact that it's having on our volume, on our conversion, et cetera. And so the earlier you can get in, someone that's super well versed in SEO, I recommend it. We have someone on our team who just knows it inside and out. And she has just been so critical to our success and growth there. And then outside of that is, of course, the balance, though, of creating content to rank, but also ensure that you're actually adding value. Again, obvious things that I think worth mentioning, because we were cranking out content earlier this year and we were hitting, we wanted to do X amount of pieces per month. We also wanted to make sure that users weren't just bouncing, that we were actually capturing and nurturing these leads, and that we actually were saying something that made sense. We weren't just fluffing up the content, because in this industry, like, something so core to our brand is empowering users to understand the decision that they're making. If you haven't gone through a mortgage or a refinance, I haven't, but I've been working here for 3 years now. It is extremely complex. I still don't understand things to this day, and I'm someone that's deeply integrated in it. And so while growing top of funnel through SEO is critical, ensuring that we're actually educating, adding value through the content is where that brand piece comes in. And so while we're not spending on brand, we're starting to put some foundation in place to build out kind of who we are. And then ideally, we can use that messaging and that framework on more of paid channels. So went a few different places here, but those are the overall owned channels. I'd love to see if there's any other lessons I can think of or any questions on that.
Yeah, well, I would just ask, so where did the role for own channels stop in terms of the customer signing up, for instance? At which point are you handing that to product, or I don't know who owns it, but or is marketing actually responsible for that sort of customer communications?
So that's where that collaboration comes in, and it's a really blurry line, and I like for it to be. It's funny because when I was building this team the past few months, a big question that always came up is, what's the difference between me and a product, or what am I accountable for? And something that I think has been really valuable is that you are a team working on this. There is a goal that we as a team are accountable for, but as long as you guys achieve this goal, we don't actually really care who's doing the day-to-day work, in a sense, as long as there's a collaboration. Of course, it's not like a group project where one person doesn't do the work. But I think ultimately kind of removing the division of functions has been really powerful across product and marketing, because it really is a collaboration. That's
great. And did on any of the own channels, did you work with agencies, or was it all also in-house?
So the one agency we did rely on was a content creation agency. So we ourselves put together the end-to-end strategy, both the SEO strategy, so the strategy to inform what content we would create to rank, but also our editorial strategy, so more so the content we want to create that builds our brand awareness. And so at the time, we just didn't have enough writers in-house, and so we relied on a external agency that also was really well versed in our space, because going back to my earlier point, it's very complex. And so we need writers who can understand the complexity, go really deep, come up for air, and then simplify it for our consumers. So that was a really helpful agency to kind of kick off the creation of content. But outside of that, we have our design studio in-house, actually putting the imagery together for our content, the graphics together. And so that's really been the mix that we've been relying on.
What about on the inside side? So if you're coming up with a segmentation strategy and you're trying to get to that point where you're talking to 15 different segments, is that also an in-house function? Are you partnering up? Maybe just talk a little bit about how you came to the segmentation strategy, for instance.
Yeah, so we, again, are pretty fortunate in how we've been able to hire. And so we have built out a really impressive data scientist team. And so we've been able to leverage that team, and they partner with us on defining and actually outputting the work for our segmentation analysis. And so there are really good agencies out there. If you haven't really started the work or don't have the right hires, I would 100% go that route. It just got to the point this year where we had the team available. And so, of course, it made sense to then bring that capability in-house. But segmentation is so powerful that if it's a matter of waiting 6 months to make those hires or go pay a little bit more for an agency, I would recommend the agency route for sure.
Okay, great. Also, we have in the Q&A here, I see David left a note that said he didn't search for his refinance because our neighbor is in the mortgage biz and was the same lender as he used the first time around.
Word of mouth. That's the most powerful tool in this industry.
It's true, and I think almost all the industries, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
all right, so you went from performance into the own channels, and we talked a little bit about. Now let's talk about the latest role, this product marketing role, and maybe just give us the high level of what it is, and a little bit about the kind of activities you're running.
Yeah, so it's funny, I don't have much experience outside of Better with marketing, but when you hear of a product marketing function, it's really mostly at a B2B company. It's not very common at a D2C company that you have this. And so maybe we need to rebrand it, which I know we talked about, but ultimately why this came about is that we have our core offering that we launched with, and we are constantly optimizing our experience, and we are building out new features, not on a weekly or daily basis, because what we are building is quite complex. But what we came to realize is that there are certain new audiences or new offerings that we're exploring. And that's where this need arose for a product marketer. And what actually, though, the need was, I think, because again, the title might be confusing or might not be totally correct, is that we needed someone to really help deeply understand the customer. And so I think you can argue that product does do that. They put the customer first, sales does that. But really, marketing's role is to be the customer in the room, advocating for them at every instance and making sure that we're adding value, that we're delivering on the expectation we're setting. And so we realized that we really needed the marketer there to help with that, to partner on the research, to make sure that we were understanding the mindset, what drives the customer's decision making. From there, once we understand that and deliver on that need with ideally the right feature, we need to go to market with it. So do we put it in our email marketing to existing customers? Do we do a whole paid campaign behind it? That's where this need really arose, to make sure that we were building the right thing. We were solving an actual customer problem, because historically, not anytime recently, but historically, a lot of what we were building came from internal ideas. And while we are potential consumers of our product, we're not actually in the midst of buying a home. And so we wanted to make sure that we were really solving the right problem for our customers. And that's where the product marketer comes in. And then that's also why we make sure that we're successful in marketing it, what we're here to do. And so examples of why this arose, two quick ones, is we realized, and very obvious, but our core customer for a while and still is people who are actually buying or refinancing their homes. We also, though, recognized that we really needed to start to go after real estate agents. And so that's a net new audience for us. And so we figured the better approach there was to put a product marketer on it to deeply understand that audience. What is their mindset? What motivates them? How can we get in front of them at the right time with the right message, what marketers do? And so that's one example of where that need arose. So maybe not a typical product marketing role. We could call it an audience marketer. But again, it kind of goes back to that core customer first person in the room who's helping think through all of the research and needs that are needed to go to market with the right thing and ultimately make it successful.
Yeah, that's great. It's the true kind of cross collaboration too. It's a function where you're able to kind of build the team to accomplish the set of goals you need, right?
Yeah.
Can you maybe just is there an example of the kind of work that you're doing in that role right now?
Yeah. So I can give an example of a great feature we rolled out. So David already spoke about it. Rates have been crazy this year, and a lot of rate tables, so the actual feature you're interfacing with, are not available online. So for one, we have that advantage where you can actually log on to better.com and access custom rates for you online. But a few months ago, what we didn't really have is to showcase, okay, if I want to refinance my home, how much can I save if I refi with a certain rate? It seems, again, very intuitive and simple, but it's actually quite complex to surface that to customers. So we built out what we called our refi benefits tool, where you can basically see the benefit of refinancing. So how much could I save a month if I went with this rate? How much could I save in closing costs, et cetera? And so we built this feature knowing that it would help with the decision making and ultimately reduce time on the phone with our sales team. And so we actually then marketed that through email campaigns, through content, and we made sure that customers were aware of this feature and understanding that it was transparent, accurate, and to basically reduce labor costs on our end. So that was a really good example of a product marketer working with product to amplify a feature that was really valuable.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that is, it's funny that you preface product marketing as maybe being the wrong title, but when you describe it like that, it is very much what product marketing is. It's very collaborative
Right.
with product, even in a B2B company like Celtras. I mean, they have the insights on the customer, they have the insights on the competition, and they're your partner from a marketing standpoint and kind of revealing what's important about the product and then figuring out how to communicate that effectively to your audience. So
Exactly. Yeah.
what are when you look at what you're doing right now, how is it, how did things change from the pandemic, for your business and for the collaboration and the team? What has it been like in terms of, because what you're describing sounds very much like a group of people in a room, right? Coming up with an idea and going to market with it, but you're not in a room and you're still doing it. So I'm just curious, were you already working in that collaboratively beforehand? Did the pandemic and remote work change how you worked? Maybe you can just talk a little bit about that transition and how you're still able to really collaborate effectively.
Yeah, so that was exactly it prior to. We were constantly in rooms, whiteboarding. We loved to whiteboard our ideas together. And ultimately that collaboration and kind of philosophy around it has stuck around. We are a big Google Docs company, and I think that really is a great part of it, having access to the same document, the same ideas, even comments. What I will say we've done, though, is that we are constantly in meetings, and it comes obviously at an expense. Zoom fatigue is real, and so we are very aware of that and making sure that people are taking time off, and we have amazing offerings that like our people team has done, but we would rather kind of have those constant meetings happening, those daily stand-ups, those daily check-ins with just a cross-functional group to ensure that we're all on the same page about a project. So at its core, like, collaboration has been so critical to our success, which we've really picked up on. And so it's really just been a matter of constant Zoom meetings, with a balance, of course.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's you're saying all the words. I long for the whiteboard in the office for some things, but for others, the back-to-back meetings in person, are almost just as bad in some ways. I mean, you didn't have the fatigue,
really
but you're hustling and you don't have time to necessarily do the job or do some work. It's interesting. What about we have there's some questions here from the audience that I want to get to. We have another 10 minutes, it looks like, but I've got a couple of just short questions for you. Maybe just any who is doing a great job with own channel marketing right now?
Yeah, so the few that came to mind. So I think the Skim, for example, is and the Morning Brew. They built their customer base through an own channel, and they've continued to expand on that. And I'm really impressed with just how people are so loyal to those brands. And so email really is their bread and butter. And so that to me speaks really loudly to the impact that own marketing can have. And then second to that, I'm very impressed by Credit Karma and their own capabilities. Very similar in that they are able to hook people in with a really low friction thing, the thing being access to their credit score. And then from there, they've just been able to expand and build out content that engages with them, additional offerings. So it's just, again, a really prime example of capturing their email and then upselling all the different things they have.
Yeah, no, it is amazing. It seemed like a very high bar for friction, give a social security number, but it ends up just being fairly easy, and then you can expand it. It's amazing what they've done with that. What about ideas on cross-functional and collaboration? I mean, what models, I guess maybe how would you get started if you're not already doing what you're doing today? What is some advice you could give to those that are looking to better cross-discipline and collaborate within their companies?
Yeah, so I think a big learning, and again, it depends on where you are at in terms of your growth and availability to hire. But initially when we started, we were expected to really kind of be the data person in the room, the creative strategist in the room, the marketing strategist. And when you bring in those actual people who are well-versed in that, you realize how much time you were wasting yourself trying to be the data scientist. So I would say have a really open mind. It can be intimidating to add new people to the mix. I mean, I myself was like, oh, what am I going to have? I'm not going to have a job after this, and I have plenty of work to do. So have a really open mind and realize that there are experts in these different functions for a reason. I think second to that is just try to have a really open and transparent relationship. I think to me, like what has been so critical to my success is I really, really value relationships, and it is difficult with Zoom. So I can try to think of some advice there, because I can't imagine joining a company remotely, but spending in time and investing in like the relationship building. ensuring that people feel comfortable and transparent with you. Just going to the person when you have a problem versus going to someone else is really important to maintain and really build on that collaboration.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe one question just to circle back before we go to a couple audience questions. You talked a little bit about how you have the in-house creative team who you're partnering with and how that collaboration, you treated them like an agency at first, but then started to be more collaborative. Can you maybe just talk about a lot of the marketing activities you talked about require content? And you mentioned, you're relying on your in-house agency for that content. So maybe just talk a little bit about how you are, like, what is the brief like today? Or you said you got everyone in the room, but what leads to good collaboration or successful outcomes from that collaboration from your experience so far?
Yeah, I feel like it's such a marketing 101 answer, but you really just need to simplify as much as possible and break it down to who is this audience as specific as you can be. Because if you're saying we're talking to everyone, we can do that, but that's going to change your message. And then that flows into, okay, now that we know our audience and where they're seeing this ad or where they're seeing this content, you basically really just want to set the stage for what the customer is experiencing. I think that's so powerful when you can kind of showcase they're on Facebook scrolling, they're going to see our ad, and then they're going to click into this landing page. That helps then the creative team really understand, okay, how can we influence them to take the action required? And so we try to build up briefs that are detailed, but not too detailed, because then you don't want to really do the creative job for them. So stick to your audience and stick to what you're trying to get them to do. And from there, that's where creative can take over. Don't tell them what to say. Not gonna lie, we it's a balance always. It's hard for us as marketers who know so much about customers not to just say what we want to say, but I think really stay true to audience, and that will really help to make some really strong campaigns.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think there's does it organizationally make sense for the creative team to be part of marketing, or is it too broad for that?
Yeah, we actually are. So with a growing and evolving organization, those are conversations we're exactly having. So right now, the creative team and the marketing team sit parallel to each other. They're not under the same umbrella, though, technically. And I think there's really value in having them together. I think ultimately, I less so worry about reporting lines. I really care about operating model. So if you still have to report into a different function lead for the time being, but if they are prioritizing their work as a team, if they are giving feedback as a team, i.e. if the operating model is there, then that is really what's important in this case. But I do think longer term, ideal state is to bring them together. They are really one team from my point of view. It just with a growing company, as you can imagine, there's a lot of different org structures that arise.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes the org structure does these implicit things in it, which can make it hard, even if the operating model is right. So yeah, interesting.
Definitely.
It'll be interesting to see how it evolves over time. What about, okay, so here's a couple of questions. So this one's about, how has your leadership style changed over the past few months? How have you been able to develop more personal relationships with your colleagues and partners? And I would add into that, where have you been able to find sort of serendipity with your colleagues, like those accidental run-ins in the hall, or to, have an idea together?
Yeah. So in terms of my leadership style, I would say, so because I've really built out this team, I was so used to being deeply involved in every aspect of every campaign and every decision. And I'm a really strong believer in autonomy. It does take time, though, to get there. And I would say I really think I've started to figure out the balance. I have a lot of room for improvement still, but I think ultimately realizing that I can't be in every meeting about every campaign and every decision, and figuring out, okay, how do I set up a cadence with my direct reports so that I'm still getting access and visibility to information, but I'm not blocking anything. And also, like, they should make decisions without me. I have some really strong marketers, and that's the beauty of hiring really good people. So I think kind of trusting myself and really leaning into the autonomy that I have within my team has been really a core part of kind of building myself as a leader. I think second to that, I've learned a lot about pushing my team to tell me how they would solve a problem. Again, maybe sounds like a little cliche, but we're so used to going back-to-back meetings, getting problems thrown our way, I can't resolve this. And it is in my nature just to solve it for my team. That's why I'm in this role. But a lot of what I've been trying to do is say, okay, well, how would you solve this, or how would you go about it? Because ultimately I want them to grow into leaders as well. And it is a balance, of course. There are things that have to be escalated to me. That is where I can step in. But I think that's also been a big learning for me. And then in terms of kind of keeping the water cooler talk alive, I mean, it sucks. It's not the same, truthfully. But we really do try to hold at least a bi-weekly or monthly, just hour-long event where we are not talking about anything work-related. We'll have like cocktail kits sent to us so we can loosen up a bit. Or we'll even just have people schedule 15-minute coffee chats so they can drink coffee together. So it's kind of like a forcing function, but having time on the calendar for those things is important. And we also have really prioritized some like no meeting slots, which have been really valuable for people to kind of just spend some time on Slack, hanging out and all of that. So it's too bad. It's not the same. If anyone has better experience with this or things that have worked amazingly, I would love to hear about it. But we're all trying our best.
Yeah, absolutely. And please send them to me too. Yeah, in terms of delegation or helping, your team take ownership or expand ownership, and instead of doing things yourself, it's what do you think we should do? How would you do it? Or yeah, I think those are great questions. Or what do you think the best way is? Giving them a chance to try and express the better model that you might not have come up with, and then letting them own how to do it or figure out how to delegate it themselves. And good ways to expand leadership yourself. All right, another question here. We've got love it, getting out of your own way to create leadership. What is your favorite book about leadership or marketing? I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't have one.
No, I'm lucky I have one, because we did a team book club. So we read Radical Candor. I would highly recommend it. I actually should have mentioned that. Being transparent and having that balance of giving the feedback in real time has been amazing learning, and something I'm still learning. I again mentioned I love to build relationships. I love to be agreeable. I love to have that really happy energy with my team. But what I've come to realize is if you don't give the feedback in real time, it's just going to build up and explode, most likely in a bad way. So I would highly recommend reading that book if you are a new leader, if you've been a leader for a while. And have your team read it. It makes them really actually motivated to be really transparent and ask for feedback and ask for real-time information. So that one, hands down, comes to mind.
Was the book club a good sort of team building and cultural building also for your company?
Yeah, that has been amazing. And so we actually have another book, I don't recall the name, which my team won't be happy about, that we are meeting about this month. But that exactly. So outside of a happy hour, that's another way to still talk about something relevant to our industry or to our career, but make it a little bit more casual. So I would highly recommend getting that off the ground too.
Yeah, that's great. We've also been doing a podcast listen. So we'll all listen to the same podcast. And then
I love that.
Yeah, it's another one. Looks like Emily is back. So thank you, Melanie, so much.
David was here before, so we switched spots. But thank you guys so much. That was such a great conversation. I loved your points at the end, Melanie, just about leadership and empowering your employees to make decisions for themselves, and really delegating, because I think that always leads to growth for the team overall. So thank you so much for sharing. Love hearing about your book club too. That's a great idea. We'll have to share that with our brand innovators team for the future.
Definitely.
Thanks. Thank you, Eli. Thanks for moderating. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Well, we're about halfway through our live cast for today on marketing innovation in the real estate vertical. I'm Emily Agate from the Brand Innovators team, taking over for David Teicher for the rest of today's live cast. And thrilled to hear from a few more great speakers in our lineup for the day. So next up, we are thrilled to welcome to our virtual stage Marlene DeLuca, the CMO PGIM Real Estate at Prudential. And her session will be moderated by Dan Loudon, the CMO of White Ops. Welcome, Marlene and Dan. Hi, how are you guys?
Hey there, how are you?
Good, welcome. Well, I'll hand it over to you guys and pop back in at the end, but enjoy.
Great, thanks. Marlene, great to see you again. Hope you're having a great day. Look forward to this session today.
You as well.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce again myself. I'm Dan Loudon. I'm the CMO of White Ops, and Really excited to have this talk with you today, Marlene. I really enjoyed the conversation we had a few days ago, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure the group here will learn a lot too. So let's start first by, would you introduce yourself and tell the group here a little bit about your background?
Sure. I, Marlene DeLuca, I currently work at PGIM Real Estate. I've been there for about a year and a half now. I joined in August of 2019, so I was lucky to have a good 6 months under my belt before we all went into quarantine and lockdown. In that role, I currently oversee marketing across our investment and lending business, and have a team of marketers under me, focus on communications, digital marketing, product marketing, events, RFP, and thought leadership development. Prior to joining PGIM, I was with JP Morgan for a good part of my career, 20 plus years, and had a lot of roles there. And the role I most recently held was heading up marketing for the funds business, which was focused on selling mutual funds and ETFs to financial intermediaries. So think about financial advisors and other institutions that are kind of positioning those products in clients' portfolios.
Got it. Great. All right. Well, let's have some fun with this. We talked about this earlier. I became familiar with Vogue's 73 questions, rapid response questions, where they interview all kinds of people, and it is rapid response. So I know we talked about some of these, so let's have some fun with it, so the group can kind of get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll dive into some more detailed questions. But let's first start off. What's your favorite band?
I love listening to John Denver. Puts me in the mountains, and it takes me back in time.
All right. I was not expecting that one, but I love it. All right. What's the most adventurous thing that you've ever done?
Let me think. That's a good one. I think actually very adventurous and memorable was hiking in Hawaii over the hot lava, which I'm not sure if they let you do, but it was an active volcano at the time, and we were literally dodging across it, and it was pretty exciting.
Oh, that sounds good. All right. So once the lockdown is over, where do you most want to go?
I would love to go to Italy. It is one of my favorite places to spend time. I would like to picture myself sitting outside drinking a nice cappuccino and having some amazing Italian food.
Yeah.
I will say I'm planning to we rescheduled a trip to Yellowstone National Park that was supposed to happen this summer. That's now scheduled next summer. So that will definitely, hopefully, be in the cards.
They both sound good. We had plans to go to the Grand Cayman, and obviously that got canceled. So we may try to do that again at some time. We'll see how it all plays out. All right. So if you were to look at yourself, what would be your superpower?
I think taking complicated things and simplifying them, and helping to distill information, take a problem and focus on what needs to be done and solving it. That's what I would say.
That's great. That's not everyone is good at that. That's a great one. So, okay, what is your favorite accomplishment so far in your life?
That's hard to say. I would say from a career standpoint, I've felt very fortunate to have had a lot of different roles where I've continued to learn. I think it's great when you can say you're learning and adding value at the same time. I maybe personally learning to ski as an adult, I would call I'm putting it up there as an accomplishment. I can't keep up with my kids at this point, but I can hold my own, and it makes at least so that I can participate in the family vacations.
That's a good one. A few years ago, I finally learned how to really swim. So that was a big thing for me, with my son getting his Eagle Scout with Boy Scouts. Part of that was a big scuba diving trip, and learning to swim was an important part of that. So good accomplishments there. All right. So as we look to next year, I can't believe it's December 1st, but as you look to next year, what is one of your top goals, and what do you want to achieve in 2021?
I would say I've spent 2020 in a little slower pace than I would have liked, helping to build the team and kind of finite roles within the group as I joined just at the mid to end of last year. So I think trying to really ensure that we can demonstrate the value of the team and focus on how we're building out the metrics and the right framework around those things is really one of my top goals for next year.
Yeah, it certainly has changed that dynamic of everything from working with marketing team and with all the different groups that we engage with. So I totally get it. That's a good one. And then what's a life lesson that you would like to share with the group here?
I'll take the stab at it's really the prioritizing family element, which I think is easy to say. And I think in the big things, it's easy to say, well, of course, I'm going to, not miss those real milestone things. But I would say one of the lessons that somebody had shared with me once is it's those more little things that if you can prioritize that field trip or that school concert, you'll never forget those moments, but you will not remember that business meeting you thought was more important than those things. So I took that to heart, and I do think that it's a good guiding principle.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, this will be the last rapid response question I ask. So is marketing a science or an art to you?
Oh, that's easy. It's both.
Okay.
I found myself in marketing, quite frankly. I came with an engineering background. I literally, if you'd asked me what I would be when I grew up at that stage of life, when I graduated college, I think marketing would probably be the last on the list. I just never envisioned it. I didn't understand the discipline. And I was lucky, I think, to find my way into marketing. And part of that was some of the work I had been doing on thought leadership development and working on the markets and how you explain to clients what's happening. And now that I'm on this side and I've seen marketing evolve in terms of the importance of data and utilizing data to help make decisions and measure impact. So, but there's always art and science to it. You're never going to scientifically say that X, Y, and Z 100% influenced some outcome. I mean, it'd be nice if we could, but in many cases, there's a lot of variables involved. But marketing has gotten a lot smarter over the years, and I think it's an exciting place to be. But yet, you can't turn off the creativity, because the creativity is what differentiates one campaign from another, and the memorability of your efforts. So it really needs to work together.
Yeah, that's great. I love that background that you come from, and getting a view of different worlds, I think, makes you a stronger marketer, right? And if you just only grew up in marketing, you might not be able to see everything. You have a different background, I think it helps. I started out as a finance person and ended up in marketing, so we all take different paths to get here, which is pretty interesting. So would love to hear a little bit more about your company and and what the group does. I know there's a video, so is that something that we can get to come on here through the Brand Innovator Group?
Yeah, maybe I'll give a little bit of a background.
There we go.
So thank you for playing that.
Hear more about it.
You back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well,
So I'll give a little bit of background. The video, obviously, something I'm quite proud of. It's something we created after I joined, and we rolled out this summer. And PGIM Real Estate is a part of Prudential. It's part of the PGIM investment management business, and it is run as an independent affiliate. So PGIM is a group of affiliates that have different investment disciplines, and PGIM Real Estate focuses on the real estate area. And within our business, we focus both on investments and in providing financing for commercial borrowers. And you know, the video is a little more focused on the audience around the investor community, and we can talk a little bit about the development of that. But you know, at its core, we are providing taking in third-party capital, so taking, say, institutional investors or increasingly, you know, not as much now, but growing part of our business, you know, some form of high net worth money as well, and investing that on behalf of those individuals. So we're fiduciaries for those individuals, and as we like to keep in mind, you know, we really have an end client, right? The institutional clients are our immediate client. You know, they are investing on behalf of the employees at their firms or the public workers that we see every day. And it's important that we have that mindset of who's really benefiting in the end. But what's been exciting for me to join this business is the tangibility of real estate and the ability, you know, of not just buying stocks and bonds to help a portfolio grow, but we're truly investing in properties and communities that we want to have a financial return, but there's often additional benefits that come from the investments that we're making globally. And so that's the investment side of the business. And we have a variety of product types in terms of the types of investments we'll make and how far along they are in development and how risky those investments could be. And then there's this entire other side of the business where commercial developers need to help finance projects, and they can come to PGIM Real Estate to help finance those deals as well. And then we have development partners as well. They're not our kind of first or secondary client, call it, but we do partner with those folks as well on executing on some of these projects.
that's great. I mean, sounds like one heck of a big job, right, to come into and to try to organize. And, you know, I guess my next question would be, you know, based off of that, you know, how important is it for you to kind of set a vision for the group and to collaborate and clearly communicate all this across your entire organization and all your customers and all the stakeholders?
Yeah, no, it's very, very important. And I came in at an exciting time for the business where two businesses, that investment business and lending business, were coming together. So it was a natural point to stop and say, okay, how do we position ourselves in the market? How do we ensure we don't, you know, stray away from what was been core to our investment beliefs and our general business practices, but are we articulating it in a clear way for our clients? And so we did spend some time when I first joined thinking about how we framed that. And it really becomes the foundation, right, that everything needs to be built upon when you think about a messaging hierarchy and how you're going to present yourself in the market. And not every communication is going to tout every element of your vision or come back to every principle, but it needs to all be rooted there. And I would say with the creation of the video, while I had an external audience in mind, I might have underestimated the impact this would have internally and the ability for people to really feel like they could see what we stand for and where we're headed, and just the excitement and reception we've had to this has been really, really great.
Well, that's great. Good to hear. Big role, absolutely. I guess with that, you know, coming into 2020 and the pandemic and the like, you know, how did you react to that, and how did you change your marketing playbook to, you know, try to adjust to everything that's going on in the world right now?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, as a marketing organization and as a business, had goals set out for the year. And I think the first thing we had to do, and when I really think back to the March timeframe when everything really started to feel pretty real, was first and foremost just stop and examine what we were working on and where those priorities stood, and really pivot to some extent to what the client need was at the time. So while we have these long-term things we were trying to stabilize and move forward on, we had to first and foremost ensure that we were communicating to our clients at this time. I had learned back in, my experience when going through the financial crisis, there's nothing that, you can do better than staying in front of clients and providing whatever information they need at the time they need it, and being forthcoming even when you don't know all the answers, right? It's we're here for you. We're working on this. We're trying to get the information that you're asking for. I would say after that moment, right, where we kind of had to get grounded and figure out what we needed to do more reactively, it became a pivot point to say, okay, what can we do more proactively? How can we stay in front of clients? How can we, not take advantage of the situation, but really make sure we were acknowledging what was happening, and then separately focusing on those longer term priorities and not losing sight, right? How do you keep the team motivated and recreate that work dynamic that is no longer everyone being pulled into a conference room to work through, but now as we were, for example, working on a website rollout, we needed to continue with that momentum, and we had to find other ways to kind of recreate what would have been in-person diagramming and whiteboarding and kind of mocking up pages, and all of that all had to be done remotely.
Yeah. We had talked about a couple of days ago just about, innovation and how you continue to innovate and maybe accelerate some things and through Portal and all that kind of stuff. Can you share with the group here, kind of what the thought process was and, how you think it all came out?
Yeah, there were a couple different things that we've done and did at the time. One was we happened to be, I'd say luckily, already in the process of launching a new investor portal. So a place where our investors could come and access information about the products that they're invested in, which sounds quite simple. And anyone in a more retail business, these are the kinds of things you need to operate on a day-to-day basis. But in this business, emailing out statements or, having a kind of heritage portal that was old, but like clunky, but still did the job, it was okay. But we were in the process of moving on our digital transformation to doing this. And we actually moved up the timeline, and we expedited the onboarding of our clients so that we could utilize the portal as a place to constantly update information around questions that people had, and information around products, rather than having to bombard people with emails, right? Because that was our traditional way of communicating with clients, was to send them an email. And that works fine if you've got quarterly communications, but not when things are changing daily. And we wanted to let clients know that this would be the place that they could come to get the latest information. We were going to update it. We would clearly alert them when there was something really big that they needed to go and check out. But for the most part, we wanted to really kind of almost introduce this and change behavior as to where they could come to expect that information.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, constantly innovating and, like you said, give customers access to the data they need during these challenging times is a really, important part of what marketers have to do. We're starting to get some good questions come in, so please feel free to continue to add them. We'll come to them at the end. I think we've got about 4 more questions that we'll just talk through directly, and then we'll jump to them. But going through all that you've gone through in 2020, and obviously, the pandemic is still going on, and everybody knows kind of the challenges that are going on today, right? And at the same time, there's hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel with vaccines and things like that, but who knows the timing, right? So looking to 2021, what are your goals, and what are you going to do different, and how do you succeed in this really challenging world out there?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think first and foremost, it's trying to make sure our teams stay motivated and connected. And I joined in and heard a little bit of the end of the last session, but I think it's really important to ensure that we have connectivity with team members that is outside of the meeting format. And being sensitive to everyone's different personal needs and challenges. So first and foremost, people need to be functioning at their best. I would say, aside from that, and more specifically around our priorities, we're continuing on our digital transformation. So want to continue on the efforts we've started. It's a really big part of our overall strategy. I would also say it's understanding where behavior might change or how we think about our sales process. Our sales process traditionally has been very high touch, individual sales reps going out and traveling to meet with institutional clients. and that's really important. But what we're now looking at ways that we can bring the meeting to the client in that digital way. We've all had to adopt to the Zoom and the replacing face-to-face meetings with these digital meetings. But we're looking at ways to replace property tours with videos, and not just a video of let me just show you the asset, but truly providing the context around the investment and why we've made that investment in that type of property and what that means to the overall portfolio. So, we're doing a lot more with packaging up videos and trying to bring to life some of the acquisitions we're making in our funds. And then on the borrower side, I think it's a very much a people business. So it's how do you stay in front of those clients? How are you top of mind when those needs come up and they're trying to access capital? That can be a combination of email outreach and offering up, speakers and events and things like that. But I think all of those are things that we're thinking about as we approach next year.
Yeah, it's great. I think how you said these immersive video experiences that you're coming up with, it offers a more compelling way today for people to experience the properties, and probably be something that will continue well after hopefully this pandemic is behind us, right? So this gives you guys something else in addition to the face-to-face meetings to really help benefit the clients. That's an exciting thing. And you kind of talked about it, to best engage with clients, through these different approaches. Have you gotten any responses from them or any feedback from them on how that's been and how it's helped them during these challenging times?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback has been positive. We held a virtual client conference. That's something that we've done in person every year, and had to, obviously cancel it. And so it took us a little bit of time. We wanted to really take a step back and think about what would this mean virtually, right? We're not going to replicate 2 days of in-person meetings with 2 days of virtual meetings. And I think what we ended up doing was coming up with a format that really worked. I mean, we did a high touch technology platform, and we really focused in on short segments that were 15 or 20-minute presentations, which is really not the norm, right? I think the norm had been, let's do the 45-minute panel and get 5 people up on a stage and have a dialogue, and you lose people in that environment in the digital world. And so we focused on simple graphics, supporting statements, short time frames, topic to topic. Anchored with some strong keynotes, happened to be around the political time frame where we could have some commentary around what was happening, which was interesting, of course. But I think those are some of the things we're doing, and I think again trying to find topics that are interesting to clients that we can host a webinar on, do a short piece on, but really just trying to find that balance of what we're hearing from clients in terms of questions, what our sales teams are hearing, and what we can do proactively to stay top of mind.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're right on, especially, we're all on Zoom so often. To be on it for 2 days, as we would in a normal conference, it's not realistic. And those tiny bites of content, 15, 20 minutes, that's, I think, a great idea. It's a great way to, have an impact and, but, without people getting kind of worn out from being on Zoom all the time. It's a great idea. From a standpoint of engaging with your sales or business development folks, how do you engage with them to ensure jointly you're both being successful? You're helping them be successful, and you're giving them what they need, and you're helping both at the top level branding perspective, but also driving the right kind of business conversations. How do you work together with the sales team?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate that we have a pretty open culture and have a lot of opportunities to bounce ideas off. And of course, it's been more challenging to not have those in the hallway water cooler conversations, and to be a little more scheduled in terms of those team meetings where you have to kind of tee up the questions and it'd be a tiny bit more formal than it might otherwise. But I do think it's a back and forth, right? It's hearing what they're hearing from clients. The world evolved. It went from how long will this be it may not be that long into will this ever end? And I think
Right.
nobody really predicted we'd be in this state this long. I think it was nobody really wanted to think that far and think that it would end up that way. And so we've adjusted, of course, adjusted as we've gone. And I think too, oftentimes that there's an element of, yes, sales might have a good idea that we can take and leverage and then figure out how to scale for, call it, broad set of clients, but equally there have been some, incremental changes we've made to our process and procedures that, maybe at first weren't received, open arms, but I think that showing data and information, for example, just the simple task of sending an email and not attaching something, but sending a link to the web instead to get the access to that information, right? Some of these things are things that, other organizations have done 10 plus years ago, but in other industries, it was just like, well, that's what the clients want. They want the attachment. They want it to be easy. And it's like, well, if we send them to the web, we can track that they clicked it and we can show them other content on the right-hand rail, right? Like those are all basic things sometimes, or some of the things we're working on.
Yep, that's great, and it's having an impact. And then I guess communicating up, or with your leadership team, how has that been over the past year? And give us your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, our leadership team has been very engaged from the start on a lot of the efforts that we've done. So it's not so much a here's all the things we did and here's the report out at the end of the quarter. I'd say it's a little more fluid than that. It's here's what we're working on, and we do get a lot of engagement and input from senior management. And I think everybody would love to say that it's all based on data, right? The data shows, the results are here. And that's clearly the mindset that I start with. What can we demonstrate and what can we showcase from that standpoint? But I would also say it kind of comes back a little to that art, right? There are many influential points in the sales process. And I recognize that. And so I think that you have to be smart about how you demonstrate the impact you're having along the way, whether it's always a metric or not always a metric. I think that there are a lot of other ways that you can, showcase that. And I think some of the results we've seen, really come from client feedback, the portfolio manager's feedback, right? One portfolio management team is seeing what we're doing for another portfolio management team, says, hey, I'd really like a video that showcases XYZ, or could you take a look at my pitch book? I see how you simplified, XYZ's message. I'd love for your team to take a crack at mine. So, these things happen a little organically as well. And I think sometimes that it's almost that recommendation, but internally, that allows you to demonstrate that what you're doing is having an impact.
Yeah, it's always great when word gets out that marketing is really helping and they start coming to you for help, right? It's a wonderful thing. Last question, and then we'll go to Q&A, is, you've recently changed jobs. What advice would you give to someone, going through the same type of thing right now?
That's a good question. I would say, first of all, foremost, it's coming in and listening, right? You've got to get a lay of the land. You've got to just understand how things have been done. Try to get at why they've been done that way. Learn the business, right? Because nobody's going to know everything on day one, even if you came from a similar industry. And then I do think the most important thing is leveraging the fact that you have a new fresh set of eyes, right? And asking those questions around why things have been done that way. So you listen first, soak in as much as you can, and then I think quickly try to pivot and really challenge the status quo. And I think the hard part, but what will make somebody successful in a role change, is trying to really boil down where can you have the greatest impact in a short amount of time, right? So you want to look at the 30, 60, 90 days. It's pretty common approach to say what am I going to try to tackle and when. But I think being able to pick some of the low-hanging fruit, but then start initiatives that are going to take longer, but you set the groundwork early so that those things get underway. It's a combination. And lastly, I would say it's just really surrounding yourself with the right team and figuring out what folks are there and how they're working, and then how do you complement whatever skill sets are there if there's areas that you feel could be lacking or just not having had experience in before.
Got it. That's good. That's good advice. All right. So there's now a lot of questions, so we'll try to get through them here with the time that we have left. So predictions for 2021, any, one or two that you're thinking about? Everybody's asking that question right now.
Predictions. That's hard to say. I think I'm not sure which angle to take, but I think that look, I think that the markets have been surprisingly resilient. So I think we're all somewhat hopeful that that bottom doesn't fall out. I think that there's a lot of discussion around where we all end up in terms of our workplace habits, right? So what will the future of work look like? I mean, it is the $1,000,000 question. I think that no question the technology kind of was on that high spike of, right, we've all, as I think, many companies have invested in a lot of great tools and technology that make remote working and flexible working probably more of a reality than it was ever before. But I do think that nothing will replace that in-person meeting and that, collaboration space. So, people are always asking, what's the future of office? It's like there will be office. It's just a question of what it looks like and how you maneuver it. But people need a place to come together and work both professionally and the social interactions, right?
Yeah, that was talked about in the last session, the importance of social interaction. And speaking of that, next question is, have you been able to build, any personal relationships with colleagues or with partners during this time when we're all remote?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the beginning, we had some video technology and people were quite hesitant to turn the cameras on. And it was almost that dread of a video call. Geez, like, what am I wearing? Is my hair combed? And I think what really just broke down that barrier was when it became like everybody had it. And then, the bar seemed to come down a little bit and the expectations of how dressed up people got for video calls and work from home every day. And so I think, that has just allowed, right, us to, I think people's guards came down pretty quickly. I think in the beginning, guards were up, guards came down, people's pets are walking through their rooms, right? It's like kids pop in, they're grabbing something behind someone. It's okay. Like, all of this stuff has now become okay. And I think those become points where you just naturally can bond with your team, again, in a smaller setting. Where you're learning about what's happening in people's lives in that aspect. So, and then trying to do those kind of social things. We've had a variety of different things from large scale to smaller team. We've all been on Zoom drinks where you're like 3 pages in of people and like one person is monopolizing the conversation, and that's just a bit awkward. But we've done cooking things where we've had chefs come on and do chocolate making around Halloween, and people brought their kids. So, there's a lot of different things we've tried. And I think the more informal and the ones that also involve people's families have actually worked really well, because like at 6 o'clock or 5:30, do I want to do an activity that's keeping me in my office even longer, or do I want to go down in my kitchen and engage with my kids in some way?
Yeah. I think there are great ideas there. One of the things we're doing for the holidays, we're inviting customers and things like that to a magician event. The magician who's been on the Tonight Show and all that kind of great showmanship. We're doing a personal view of that. And those type of things, I think, build great relationships, not only with people within your organization, but with customers as well. They're fun. All right, next question is, what do you look for when hiring team members?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's a combination of, obviously you've got your basic table stakes of whatever the role calls for, right? Is that level of experience there? Is the person capable, hardworking, and can really articulate some of the accomplishments that they've had in their career. But I would say on the softer side, there is an element of that cultural fit, and that's always hard to describe, but somebody who can communicate well, feels like they're bringing themselves right to that conversation. Again, we're not meeting with people in person, but we are doing video calls. And I think it's just important to see whether or not somebody opens up and has that other side. You're not necessarily going to get all that from a first conversation. And I think it's really important in this environment to have a few different conversations along the way, especially for a more senior hire.
Yeah. Good question here. What's the biggest lesson that you think marketers have learned this year?
I mean, I would say for us and my team, it's been the way we work and the leveraging these collaboration tools that we've had but hadn't probably utilized. I mean, everything it's not just the video meeting capability. I mean, we're using Microsoft Teams, and it's the kind of having these specialized chats where we're doing collaboration for projects within those frameworks, and taking things out of email. I just think that our working style in my past career and when I first started here was very much email based. It's like email this, email that attachment, and the collaboration tools of multiple people working on one document at the same time, and this kind of, chat rooms for certain projects, I think has really increased our productivity, and the collaborational element of how we accomplish things has also, I think, increased a lot. Got it.
That's good. From a standpoint of, hiring both marketing and, technology savvy people to your organization, what approach do you take to try to find those really hard to find, people with that type of background?
I mean, it obviously depends on the role. I think networks are very important. I think it does help to have folks that you can reach out to, not only for recommendations, because I'm not necessarily inferring that you need to know somebody to get that introduction, but I do think that it helps as you're interviewing candidates that have worked at different places to see what you can find out if you speak to folks who might have also worked at those places. I think it is hard, right? You're taking a leap of faith oftentimes based on what a candidate is telling you they're capable of. And so any way you can, put that to the test is good. I've, definitely hired roles where we've had actual tests, which I try to avoid. I mean, it doesn't always, it's sometimes a little hard to administer, call it, but there are some roles where I do think you actually want to, put something out there, whether you're hiring an investment writer. It's like, okay, well, here's an interview we did with someone. Could you write a summary? And you actually have some tangible work product to look for as you're evaluating some of those. But from the digital marketing combination is challenging. And I think in this world, again, I think in the beginning, people were probably gun shy to even make moves. And I think that people were a little like, let me wait and see what happens. I think now that there's been this longer time frame, there's a lot more openness for people in changing jobs during this environment.
Yeah, that's good. And then, obviously we're all working from home and our teams are too. How is your work-life balance, and how do you ensure your team members have work-life balance as well?
Yeah, I mean, the meetings are creep up, right? The back-to-backs 1,000% still exists, and sometimes the only break you get is by putting your camera off and stepping out of the room for a minute. But I would say, it's important, and there are periods, right? I have found the cyclicality of we're working up to a deadline, a few of us are engaging a couple nights a week. You step away for dinner, then you're coming back. It's just almost too easy, right? Your computer's right there. You're connected to people. And so I find myself trying not to ping people or even send the emails because I know they're going to respond and I don't want to put that pressure on people. One of the things that I was impressed with within our organization that, one of the senior leaders has stated is, let's try to keep an hour in the afternoon open, 2 to 3. It's dark at 4:30 or 5. So there's no more going for a walk after work. So we kind of have this, unofficial time block from 2 to 3 where we're trying not to schedule meetings so that we can give people that fresh air time to just get outside their office, take a walk, even 15 minutes. I mean, it does a mind wonders to do that.
Yeah, I've actually blocked a half an hour on my calendar right at noon if I can, and I've asked my team to do the same thing, and I call it the team walk. And we all just try to get out and get some fresh air, because otherwise, like you said, it's dark by 4:30, and that's pretty tough. So keeping that balance, I think, is really important. So it's a great answer. Well, looks like Emily's coming back on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for such a great session. And you're encouraging me to get outside right now and take a walk, because I feel like that's so important for everyone's, mental health and our, productivity throughout the day. So love ending on that note. And thank you both so much. Hope to have you back again soon, Marlene and Dan.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Marlene. It was a lot of fun.
Bye. All right, and we're next up. We're on to our final session of the day, and so last but not least, we'll be hearing from Abby Lee, the SVP of Marketing and Communications at Remax, and her session will be moderated by Uma Kanapan, the Product Marketing Director at Newstar. Welcome, ladies.
Hi, Emily. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. And hi, Abby.
Good.
Hi there. I'm just getting my video.
Always takes a second.
I know, it's giving me a weird start video open. Hold on. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
It
No,
is.
you know, as the months have gone on, we've dealt with our fair share of technical issues with everything under the sun. So we know it's always hard to get everything squared away. So no problem at all. Where are you tuning in?
It is not giving me an option to start the camera.
Okay, let me see. Let me check with my team really quick.
It's giving me FaceTime HD camera.
I think we could just start with your audio, unless the FaceTime HD works. You could try that, but if not, you know, we'd still love to just have you guys chat using the audio if that's the only thing that works.
Yeah, it's just not letting me. Oh, wait, there we go. Got it.
There we go. Yay. Okay.
Yay.
It's always worth a couple troubleshooting options, but once you know, we tried a few, don't want to waste anyone's time, but so glad that we got that to work. So I'll hand it over to you guys to kick it off.
Terrific. Thanks, Emily.
Yes. Yeah, thanks, Emily. Abby, I know we've talked a few days ago, but wanted to thank you for your time during this session. And I also wanted to thank our virtual audience for joining us for this chat today. Abby, when we talked earlier, I really loved your background. So I'd love to kick off things by finding out a bit more about you and what you've done, because you have a deep and varied marketing and advertising background. And you're also a third generation realtor. So I think that's a great background, and it really comes in handy in your pivotal role at Remax in setting up a world-class marketing organization. Could you share a little bit more about your career, what got you here, and then also what you're responsible for at Remax today?
Sure. Yeah. So just a little bit about me. I grew up in a real estate family. Interestingly enough, it was my grandmother who was in real estate starting probably, oh gosh, in the mid 1950s, early 1960s. We lived outside of New York City, and my grandfather was a banker. And so my grandmother was one of those people who just was a go-getter and got into real estate because she loved relationships, and found that real estate was something that really connected her with the community. So she actually in the 70s started her own agency, her own brokerage with two of her friends. So it was three women. It was called Heck, Deegan, and Nash, and they called themselves the Hens, which was, you know, they were in, which was always kind of funny to me. But she was in real estate for probably the span of 25, 30 years. And so I got a chance as I was younger to, you know, visit with her, go on listing appointments, things like that, kind of get my foot into a little bit of just hearing about real estate. And then my mother got into real estate. So two of them both worked. That was in a different area outside of Philadelphia. But my mother did that for quite some time. Went to college and got actually an art history degree. Got out of college in 1993 when the job market was not so hot, and took a job at a media company called, at the time, Western International Media, which has now kind of progressed into Initiative Media and things like that, and started out my media buying career. So that just kind of gave me a lot of insights into media as a whole, different media planning, media buying, and that sort of thing. And as I got a little bit older, met my husband, moved out to Colorado, and wanted to start a family. And so took a position with Remax as a media buyer there, purchasing some regions. And over time, my husband both got his real estate license, and I got my real estate license as well, to kind of keep up that family tradition. But also, I very much wanted to understand the ins and outs of what one of my customers would go through during a real estate transaction. So, and just over time have kind of grown responsibilities, and now responsible for not just the media aspect of the advertising funds that we have, but the creative agency we have in-house, our editorial and communications team, both internal, external, and then both also responsible for the relationships with our various agencies.
That's great. I want to dig into more of your grandmother's background and sort of the lessons you learned from her, because obviously your grandmother was a trailblazer, your mom was a trailblazer, and you're continuing tradition. It'd be great to hear, build out some of those lessons you've learned from both of them, as well as your career trajectory so far. Because I'm sure the audience would love to hear some of the things you've learned and you still lean on even today.
Well, and I would say today, in the greatest sense of the word, things that I took from my grandmother in her time in real estate have never proven more true than in the current environment today. And I think we talked about this a little bit, and that's relationships and communication, because real estate is such a relationship and emotional driven industry and transaction. And I watched my grandmother over the years. Even she passed away in 2008. And I still remember visiting with her the Christmas before she passed away. And she was still both writing hundreds of Christmas cards to past clients and also receiving them. And she had been out of the business for, oh gosh, at that point in time, probably close to 30 years she'd been out of the business, but still kept in touch because she helped people find their dreams, and they never forgot that. And they just, whether they were still in Chappaqua, New York, or had moved on to different areas. A great story that I have is one of her clients back in Chappaqua, New York, later moved to outside of Chicago. And I think you and I talked about this a little bit. And we moved to that same town outside of Chicago. And who was the first person that my parents called? It was my grandmother's past client who was now selling real estate. So we got to kind of, eternalize that relationship a little bit. But I think during this whole pandemic, and this will kind of lead into the strategy that we've had as a company for what we provide our agents and brokerages. But those relationships, people have been, as we all know, locked down in varying degrees for the last, 9, almost 10 months. And having that relationship and just really that check-in from somebody, how are you doing? Is there anything that you need from me? We've seen, obviously the residential real estate, which we all thought back in March was potentially going to have a great decline, has just continued to boost because people are making different changes than they may have 10 months ago. They're moving out of the urban areas, maybe upgrading to get a home office, things like that. But what we found is the agents who've been the most successful are not the ones that have been salesy, but the ones that have just gone out and said, what can I do for you? Is there anything your family needs? How are you doing emotionally? Is there, anything that we can help with at-home schooling or, anything like that, going for a walk, whatever it might be, obviously within safety constraints and all that kind of stuff. But that relationship is so still at the core of that real estate relationship, just as much as it was 30, 40 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you often talk about being empathetic in your marketing. And I think that's very important because people do want to feel that connection with brands. They want to make sure that their voice is heard. And so a lot of brands, I think we often talk about, it's not only about winning share of wallet, it's winning share of mind.
Right.
And so from your perspective, what do you think brands need to do now in this time of disruption as well as into the future to really be more human and approachable? Because I think that's where everybody's pivoting to, and they want that resonance with brands, and they want to connect with the brands that have that human touch and provide that human experience.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I would say, it's kind of interesting because a lot of brands doesn't matter what industry really, back in, March and April, were really changing the tone to have, if you recall, and it actually kind of interestingly enough to me got some negative press on it, but having that empathetic tone of, we're all in this together. When we thought it was going to be the 14 days to slow the spread, and then it continued on and continued on and continued on. We really all had to get together and say, hey, look, if we do this together, we can conquer this thing. And I think a lot of brands changed message to that tone. But I think over time, as things have started to open up, and I saw this very much with the real estate transaction, was how do you make sure that your customer is safe and that they feel safety? Because everyone, and I still feel that this is today, even in the folks that I talk to, and as we talk about 2021 and what, events might look like for our membership down the road and things like that, how do you ensure that wherever somebody is on the spectrum of whether they're not really worried about COVID for wrong or for right, or they're super worried about COVID, or they may be, high risk or what have you, how does a brand really ensure that if that customer, that client is going to be either coming into their place of business or doing business with somebody, that they are going to feel as safe as they need to feel safe? So in real estate, we've seen that with adjusting to virtual tours and really doing transactions almost 100% virtually. So that's on one end of the spectrum. Having different kits and things for their clients to go out so they can put a mask on, put gloves on, have sanitizer, make sure that the house has been cleaned. So, and, as we go into retail stores as well, making sure that those retailers are maintaining that 6-foot distance between people, and, or limiting the number of people that are coming into the store. I think one brand comes to mind that when I have gone to the few times that I've gone to the mall, Lululemon kind of has you make an appointment to be able to come in to assure that they're only going to have so many people. And, that irritates some people that they have to wait so long to, it's not a regular shopping trip, but it's ensuring the safety of those people who are in there at that particular time, which I think is just something that brands have got to make sure that they are covering their bases and cognizant of that real spectrum of feelings and emotions, and making sure that they're meeting those folks, at that place of emotion.
Those are great points. And I think it's what customers are looking for from brands. And it's great that RE/MAX is delivering it. How do you see that translating on the realtor side and broker? Because RE/MAX has done some great things on that side to enable that connection to that customer segment as well, and they're really your customers as well. So could you talk more about how you're connecting with the realtor side?
Yeah, definitely. So over the course of the last probably, and I'm glad that we were starting this, no one knew what was going to happen come March of this year, but starting last year, again, going back to kind of my core of foundationally with my family being in the business and seeing those relationships firsthand, obviously media has changed so much. So how do we put tools in the hands of our agents and brokers where they can easily be themselves, but easily communicate and keep in touch with their clients? So we've created different tools. I think last time I was on here, I talked about an app that we were using called Photify. It's a great app that is for content that you can easily be then shared out on different social media platforms. It's automatically adjusts to whatever the specifications are within that platform. It can be generic, it can be branded. So we put that tool in the hands of our brokers and agents. We also had created, and that was, Photify is something, we also have a strategy where we either partner with or we develop. And so Photify was something that was already created, great tool. So we partnered with them. Then on the kind of build it side, what we did realize a lot throughout the last couple of years, especially as digital media has grown, is that a lot of our agents, whether it be Google or Facebook advertising or whatever, were kind of cannibalizing each other and they're therefore raising the costs. So we developed a platform called Megaphone, which gives insights for us to be able to let our agents kind of know where the best places to go for them are based off of what their goals and objectives. Gives them access through a company called HomeSnap for Google, Facebook, Waze, advertising, and then also gives them access to a DSP through a company called Centro, where they can go out and run their own digital campaigns. Gives us a view at the national level where we can help give insights back so that they're not wasting a dollar. They're making sure that they're getting the best bang for their buck. And just giving them more insights into what they're doing on a digital level. So those have all been things. We've also, over the years, something that's not new, but we continue to iterate, is a design center. So again, it allows them to automate listing feeds coming in. So it's automatically sends them a video on a property, but just really trying to take them away from having to do the dirty work and get in the weeds with the work, and allowing them to go list and sell, or whatever information their clients need, because that's really what they are, as the market expert.
Yeah, that's a great idea, because it's all about making it convenient for all your customers, so they can really focus on what they need to get done. So that's a great way that Remax differentiates itself in the minds of its customers. But Remax is one of the most recognized real estate brands in the U.S. today. How do you think Remax really stands out from the crowd and differentiates itself in the minds of all its customers? You talked to some of those things, but to build that brand recognition, you've actually set the foundation and done a lot of work. Could you speak a little bit more to that as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a couplefold, because we are really a B2B to C. We have our direct customer is our franchisee or our broker owner, and then they have the agents, and then the agents have the consumer. So at the broad level, with just consumer awareness, I'll start with that. That's really everything we do at the national and local level with our advertising funds. So we continue, and this is one thing I actually was talking about with some of the team this morning is. We talked so much, and over the last couple of years, we've heard so much of, oh my gosh, traditional media is dead and everything needs to go digitally. And what's happened over time is those traditional vehicles, such as TV, have just evolved. I mean, I think people are watching, as we've seen during the pandemic, more television than ever. They're just watching it differently. So whether it's addressable TV or CTV or OTT, all of these different tactics are still very effective in driving that brand awareness, which I still would argue is at the center of building a good brand awareness campaign, because nothing kind of explains your brand and gives emotion to your brand as much as a video ad that can show sight, sound, and emotion. And it gives you 30 seconds to actually get that message across. So I still feel very strongly about that. It's just in a very different way than buying your day parts and spots and dots. And that I would say is, kind of the old school way of doing it. There are much better ways to do it. So that's one way. And then obviously we do the digital advertising as well. The good chunk of our budget goes to that. But then again, it's, I look at this as we have 135,000 agents throughout the globe. And these tools that we give them, they're all, most of them are branded. They can choose to do some unbranded, but they love the brand and they want to support the brand. But I look at it as, how do we engage those 135,000, what I would call brand ambassadors, to spread that message even more? So it doesn't fall all on the brand's back, but it's creating those brand ambassadors and those that really want to, further the brand and get the brand message out. That's where I feel our opportunity is even further. We've tapped into that, but I think throughout 2021, especially since all the learnings that they've had as individuals as well during the pandemic, I think they see what value is brought to them, not just by these different tools, but the content within those tools as well.
Yeah, and one constant theme I'm hearing here, Abby, is that there's a lot of innovation going on at with your team and at Remax. And that's sort of new in real estate. And I think a lot of things have gotten forward because of the pandemic. Can you speak to how you foster a culture of innovation at Remax and some of the initiatives that have come out of that, fostering that innovation? And also, what are some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome to launch some of those new initiatives?
Sure. Well, I'll kind of take it from a cultural angle if I could, because
Sure.
starting back probably about 2018. I'll go back a little further. The year before that, 2016, 2017, we launched a second franchise model called Motto Mortgage. So then, before that, it was just Remax, the real estate company. Then we added Motto Mortgage as our mortgage arm for our brokers and our franchisees. But in 2018, we made an acquisition of a company called Bouge. And they are a technology company that we acquired to start building out most of our technology. So they started with our CRM, things like that, .com, the new Remax.com, consumer app, things like that. So we started making these acquisitions. And since 2018, we've now had 4 acquisitions. We acquired Bouge, and then a company called First.io, which is actually an app that our agents can go into, upload their contacts, and then it actually gives them ratings on their contacts about who's more likely to buy or sell in the next coming months. They can actually also see what deals they've lost. So if someone in their contacts has done a deal, done a transaction, they actually start taking a look at what commission they've actually lost out on. And then we've had a couple more this year of a company called Gadberry, which is a data company out of Arkansas. And then on the Motto side, a company called Weemlo. So we've made a lot of innovations. A lot of it's around first-party data. As you can tell, obviously, First is a first-party data company. Gadberry, back when we purchased or acquired Bouge, we also started a data arm of Remax called 73, which is now what all the MLSs filter through. So we have all of that first, data for ourselves for first party. So as you can see, there was a huge transition from just being a traditional kind of franchisor, helping our brokers and agents, to building out kind of this support system of technology. That was a huge, strategic directional change for us, but it also did have, it's also a cultural change for us. You go from just being a franchisor to also having all these underpinnings of technology. And technology and real estate aren't always the same cultures in companies. So mirroring the two of those and then prioritizing, I think, all the things that we want to do from a technology perspective to support Motto and Remax, because that's the acquisitions are 100% to support and grow out, whether it be more data in Remax.com or more data for First to give them more insights. So I think that's been the biggest innovation over the last couple years, which I think has put us in a really good position today. Also, I would think a challenge because it's grown our headquarters staff from about 250 to 300 to close to 600. And especially during this pandemic when we're not in the office, kind of getting that, keeping that culture. I will tell you, our CEO, Adam Contos, and our Chief Customer Officer on the Remax side, Nick Bailey, and our President on the Motto side, Ward Morrison, and our CFO and our COO have done a fantastic job of trying to keep the culture, because we have a very, very strong entrepreneurial culture. But that has been a challenge. You meet a new coworker. I've probably hired 5 people in my org via Zoom this year, which, can't wait to give them a big hug and just say, so glad that you're a part of the team. That's going to be down the road. But all of those things, just kind of having that shift to focus on the technology support system that we have. And then also what that's done kind of just to the culture, I think has been a challenge. I think probably one of the greater ones that we've had this year.
How do you, because I know from everything I've read and heard, Remax is very big on the culture, the connections. And as you said before, the industry is all about relationships. So how with people spread out, people sort of in different places, how do you keep that culture going? You talked about some of the things, but what's important and how do you bring people together?
Well, I hate to use the word Zoom, but we try to do a lot of fun things via Zoom, especially I'll speak specifically to my team. We try to do a lot. We did a great trivia. This is for anyone who's looking to do a team builder. And I'll have to post the name up or send it to you guys. But our VP of communications got this company that ran this whole trivia, and then we got broken out into groups, which was great because it mixed up the team. Since I do have marketing and communications, it's, sometimes and especially now they work so much more in their own silos as opposed to cross-functionally as we used to in the office. That things like that have been a great kind of just fun thing to do to kind of, let's take work out of it for a second and let's just have a little fun and get to know each other. So those things have been really fun to do.
That's awesome. I'm going to drill down a little bit more into sort of the technology investments you've made and how data is very important. How do you see data and the insights you can derive from data and analytics really driving really transforming advertising and marketing in the industry?
Oh gosh, well, it cannot be underestimated at all. I mean, data is, for us now, data is everything. I mean, we are such a data-driven marketing organization. And actually, I'll tell you, we just recently last year switched media agencies, and one of the biggest reasons was they use a company called Buxton. I don't know if anyone has heard of Buxton, but gives great insights into down to the hyper local, even the zip code level of consumer behavior and data. And so that's everything for us because, my background, media buying 101 was, you buy on efficiency, you buy on cost per point, cost per thousand. And that's kind of how you regulate it. It was very demo based as opposed now it's people based. You're really looking at that individual person. And my team will tell you ad nauseum, our 100% goal, and if we haven't done this, we've failed. It's the right message at the right time to the right person. So you have to know who that person is. You have to know what the message is they're seeking. And you have to know if it's the right time for them. So with all the data that you can compile, you can understand where they might be. I'm just going to, in the real estate transaction per se, are they in the looking phase? Are they in the research phase? Are they in the I'm looking for an agent phase? And just using that as an example, you can then go create the messaging and segment the messaging to make sure that that right message is coming to that right person at the right time. And it's just so huge. I mean, it used to be marketing was such a gut feeling and gut reaction. Data shouldn't be scary. It should give you comfort that you're directionally doing the right thing. You might find just based off of different, testing of creative and things like that you might be off here or there. But again, data allows you to move on the fly and make those corrections. So instead of doing a year-long campaign where you're just kind of going out and saying, here's our campaign for the year, and you don't really know if you're missing the boat on it or you're off tone to somebody, data gives you all that insights just to make better decisions. So for us, it's huge. And as we continue to grow our ecosystem of data streams, whether it be through 73 or First or Booge, it's just going to give us more and more first-party data that we'll rely more heavily on.
And how do I think one of the challenges usually to be able to react real time or as close to real time to the data you're getting is kind of connecting all the pieces, right? So your internal teams, your agencies, your vendors. Yep. And that's, I think, continues to be a challenge for a lot of organizations is how do you connect all the pieces and collect the data, but make sure whatever you're deriving are actionable insights. And how do you enable that at Remax? Because I think that would be a question that everybody's asking.
Yeah, so it's for us, it's on a couple different levels. So I'll say, yes, we rely heavily. We have a creative agency, we have a media agency. We also have a very strong in-house, both media team and creative team and digital team. And that's all within my org. And then, so that's very important to have. It's very important not just to rely on your agency, but to also, and I mean, sometimes their data can be off and you might say, I don't agree with that. We also have as we built out Booge and things like that, we also have a very strong BI department at Remax, which looks at a lot of different things with our first party data. So they can actually, not only do we feed that off to the agencies, but they can also give us insights that then our internal team. So that would be one thing that, don't, and I love our agencies, don't get me wrong, but definitely have teams within your organization that can take a look at that data. You are going to know your business better than any agency ever will. So all that you have to be able to take their data and kind of scrub it for what you know about your business, but you're also going to have to explain data back out to your agencies to help them make better decisions. Because again, I said it, but I can't reiterate this enough. No agency is going to know your business better than you are. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's what we're seeing is that brands are increasingly taking ownership of not only the strategic planning, but the data bit, the data part, and really making sure they're providing the right direction and success measures to their agencies. I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I think we can all agree that this year has been one of continuous disruption, but that has created the need to be more nimble and creative, and really, as we talked about before, Abby, really think about the art of the possible.
Right.
Can you share your perspective on how the relationship between brands and customers has changed, and how companies need to adapt now and into the future to continue to grow customer expectations?
Yeah, I think, and I'll use a couple different examples that I've seen. I mean, I think we had, going into the pandemic, we probably had throughout the world, we had some agents, real estate agents, who were utilizing different technologies in order to do virtual showings, listings, things like that. But I don't think anyone ever got to the point where they thought that maybe for 6 months to a year, that's how they would be operating business, let alone, mortgage companies, title companies, figuring out how to do their part of the transaction. I don't know that we can always foresee what's going to be ahead of us, but thinking about I think you said this, thinking about what might be possible. Do I have and again, going back pre-March, had an agent said last year, you know what, maybe in 2020, I'm going to spend more time trying to show homes, especially if someone's out of town or something like that, via a virtual tour, or I'm going to use 3D simulation on a listing to get them to kind of see it. Maybe they still want to go see it at the end of the road, but maybe you've then eliminated contacts from different people. All of these things were available, before COVID. It wasn't as if someone created a virtual tour, in March. It was there. So maybe experimenting and trying out different technologies that are out there, whether you actually put them into practice right away, at least you're understanding what is available to you, how it might impact a customer, maybe test it out with your clients and say, well, how do you feel about this? Would you do business this way? We don't know, again, what's ahead of us, but at least we know the technologies that are out there that might allow us to adapt faster than I think we were prepared for this time around.
That's great. And the theme of the uncertainties of 2020, can you share a positive outcome or opportunity you've seen emerge from all this uncertainty? And I know you talked about there's the deepening of the relationships, but I'm sure there's been some other moments that you can share as well.
Well, I think personally, part of our culture at Remax was because we're a very relationship company. We enjoy each other immensely. We're, we're coworkers and we're friends and we enjoy working together, and that's just kind of the culture that Dave and Gail Linegar built. So that was a big struggle to not be with everybody every day. So I'll put that there. On the alternative side of that, we also weren't a very work from home friendly company at all. And in fact, even kind of, I think our founder and our CEO were, as this happened, they're like, okay, we'll probably be back in the office in another month. Let's, whatever. But I think it's proven to them and proven to all of us that we can be just as productive at home with some balance. Because I loved what I think it was Marlene who was before us, loved what she was saying about balance and things like that, because I think that that's incredibly difficult to maintain and to achieve at home. But that's been one thing that's really come out of this, and quite frankly may turn the way that we hire people in the future. So before, because we were so much kind of an at the office environment, really we're in Denver. That was kind of our sphere of where we would hire from. And not saying we don't have great talent here, but especially as we talk about technologies and things and different strategies, being able to hire anywhere in the country or really anywhere in the world, I think allows us for so much more flexibility with the talent that we can get and achieve. So I think that's been a real positive just for me professionally and personally. My kids are grown, so I don't have the same challenges. Bless every single parent who is, having the homeschool the kids, and because really truly I know a lot is on those parents. But I think for some it's been a good, just kind of a little bit more flexibility on work-life balance from just having to work just in the office 7 days or 5 days a week.
Yeah, and just based on kind of that discussion, extending it out, what drivers or trends do you see as impacting the future of real estate services and products, looking into 2021, but also beyond?
It's a great question. I think I think this virtual trend is going to continue, especially, and I think it piggybacks off of what I just said, is I think people are realizing that they also don't have to live in the state where they're employed. So I do think that people will be, I've had a ton of friends who have now purchased a home, in the mountains or at the beach, and, they're coming from Chicago or from Denver or from wherever. They're not necessarily there. So I think that virtual trend is going to continue. I still think the real estate agent is going to be at the core of that. And that's, they might even become even more essential to the transaction, because there's really going to be a trust factor of the relationship building, and then the consumer trusting that the agent knows what they're looking for. Some of our ad campaign for 2021 is going to kind of address those types of scenarios. But I see that innovation becoming more and more prevalent in the marketplace.
And before I open up the questions from the audience, any final thoughts, recommendations, or words of wisdom for our audience, Abby?
I would say use whatever data you have available to you, because it will help you make smarter decisions. The right message at the right time to the right people. If you're not doing that, you're going to, potentially be off-putting to some of your audience, and obviously you don't want that. But utilize technology, see what's out there, use the data to support your marketing decisions. And also I'd say, don't be afraid to try something and fail, because you're going to have to, in this world, iterate, and things are going to change quickly. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, try something, and just know that every fail is a lesson learned to help you succeed in the future.
That's a great point. And increasingly, I think companies are sort of behind, let's experiment fast, let's learn. And, whether it's a failure or a success, we're learning from that and growing. Here's one of the questions from the audience. the question is, increasingly business and technology innovations are required to continue to deliver customer value, but also drive revenue growth. How do you make sure you're extracting the maximum value from your data and marketing technology investments to create the right customer experiences? Abby, you talked about some of the technology you've invested in, but how do you sort of identify the gaps in that technology stack, and how do you sort of move forward with determining whether you build or buy or partner?
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that we've done in the past probably 6 months is actually developed consumer personas. So when we talk about things, we talk about, and I'm probably making up names here, but Betty the buyer and Richard the renter and Holly the homeowner. And we've kind of developed, based on our data of what they're looking for, kind of developed that persona so that every decision that we're making, we're asking ourselves in that decision making and that strategy conversation, is this what Betty is going to want? Is Betty the buyer going to want this technology? I'll give you, an example. One thing, we did some research a couple years ago. Actually, it was just about a year ago. And one thing that homeowners overwhelmingly say that they would love to have is, more insights and more transparency into the transaction itself. So what technology could you build to really, there are different people that are within the transaction. You've got the mortgage lender, you've got the title company, coordinators, transaction coordinators. So where on that kind of Domino's pizza line, pizza tracker, how can you develop something where there's more transparency to the consumer? They take more control. And those are the types of things that we look at, of not just research, but then taking that research into the personas and saying, is that something that, Betty would want or Richard would want? Hopefully that answers.
Great. That's a great way to do it. I think that's all the time we have for today. I think we've tackled a couple of questions from the audience, and Abby, you've provided a lot of insights into how your team runs and how Remax runs. So thank you for that, and thank you for your time. Emily, back to you.
Yes, thank you guys so much. I absolutely loved hearing Abby about your 3 generations of family all in the same business. So inspiring, and we're so happy to have you guys close out today's live cast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Well, and thank you all to everyone who's tuning in from their homes. Such a great day full of amazing speakers speaking on marketing innovation across the real estate industry. So we're so happy to have you all here, and hope to have you join us again tomorrow for our next live cast, which will be at noon Eastern time on D2C marketing. So we'll be joined by marketing leaders from Roan, Newbull, Drinks, and more. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.